Good morning. This is the Citrus County Planning and Development Commission public hearing for October 5th, 2023. If you would like to join us at this time, I invite you to please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Lord, please give us the grace to be understanding, patient, and tolerant. With these attributes, we can conduct our work in a manner which will be pleasing to Thee, our county, and its residents. In the Lord's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the courtesy of the applicants, the board, and others present, please silence any devices at this time. May we have the roll call, please?
The following Planning and Development Commission members are present. Stacy Worthington, Chair. Richard Barmez, First Chair. James Royce, Second Vice Chair. Robert Bass, David Bramlett, Michael Facemeyer, Kurt Stone, and Chuck Dixon.
Thank you. If any person decides to appeal any decision made by the commission with respect to any matter considered at this hearing, he or she will need a record of the proceedings, and for such purpose, he or she may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceedings is made, which record includes testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is to be based. During the public input portions of the meeting, individuals are given 3 minutes and representatives of an organization are given 5 minutes. When anyone wishing to speak comes to the podium, please complete a yellow form and hand it to the recording secretary. Please print your name, address, and the number of the application for which you are speaking on the form. The yellow forms can be found at the podium by the door. If representing an organization, a letter of authorization must accompany the speaker or be on file. Comments will be limited to the topic being heard. Please state your name and give your address for the taped record. At this time, we will open to the public if you'd like to address the commission on any of the items that are not on the agenda today. Anyone? Well, we're going to open to the public for each application later, but if you had a general thing that you wanted to discuss with the Planning Commission, this would be the time. If you would please come to the podium, and the recording secretary will take your yellow form.
Anyways, I appreciate your time.
We need your name and address.
David Bigford.
Thank you.
Your address? 9126 Debbie Lane, Hudson, Florida.
Okay.
I've got a piece of property that I own, I bought, and a business at the corner. I own Superior Self-Storage at the corner of, not the storage is not on the corner, but it's but I own the property now adjoining it at 491 and 200. There, that kind of triangle property. We bought it with the intentions of enlarging our storage with adding 2 more climate control buildings there, back in the woods there. And our access would be off of the adjoining, the property that we already have.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I think he's talking about a pending application that's not before you yet.
I think we already
You
saw
heard
it.
it and continued. It's continued, so it's pending.
Okay.
What do you
So
mean pending?
well, I think what we're trying to say is that application, the appropriate time would be to come back and speak when that application is before the board on that topic.
Well, but what I was wanting to do was try to educate and try to understand a few things before we move forward with that application. I think that application right now it's just sitting there. We're not pushing it forward, but I'm trying to understand some things so I can make a decision.
Very good. Understood. I think what the best course of action would be is for you to reach out to the staff and they can help you with the application. This board is going to make a decision on whether to approve that application. So really, this is not the back and forth that should occur. Staff would be willing to help you on.
But the staff is like, well, we need to figure out what the board's thinking and this and that. So I come here trying to kind of understand where we're at with this because, before the staff tells me, when I talk to the staff pushes it back on the board. and now the board's pushing it back on the staff, and it's like, okay, well, where are we at? I mean, right now, it's, you know, where it's at is the zoning on this property right now is set up to where I can do some stuff without even having to come here, which would not be a good idea. I think what I'm proposing.
Here's what I would like to ask, because we really can't continue this
Okay.
discussion here. I think staff will be willing to help you. The staff is not going to, we don't converse with them about our opinions on anything. So
Yeah.
where they can't get into anybody's head, or I don't know what that means. So when your application comes up, we'll hear everything, and you'll get all of our comments at that time. But for now, please.
But then it's a yes and no at that time, right?
I don't know.
I
It
mean-
could
I
be
mean, I'm
continued.
just saying-
I don't know, but this forum right now is not the appropriate time for
What
this
is this
discussion.
forum for?
This is for not on a specific application coming before this board.
Yeah. Well, only thing I wanted to do here was give the board some time to think about it before the thing comes, because you come here and you give 5 minutes, go, well, no, we decided no.
Thank
And
you
it's
very
like-
much. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Carla Boone, 5260 Smoky Mountain Point. I have some pictures. of
Ma'am,
what-
could you speak into the microphone?
Okay. Do I give the pictures here or over, starting here? The last picture is what my neighbor did trying to straighten out the mess that the log truck made. Carla Boone, 5260 Smoky Mountain Point, Crystal River, 34423. RE Private Roads. This was originally addressed to the BOCC. We've collectively raised money to repair Gum Street. Smoky Mountain Point is the farthest back off Gum. Recently, they've been clearing land on North Smoky Mountain Point. My estimation is 5 to 10 acres clear cut. Log trucks are smashing our roads. They've destroyed them, what we've put in there on money to keep them safe. Every time you collect an impact fee, we get the shaft. My recommendation, you collect those impact fees, you spend them where it needs to be, where it's going. I mean, if you have to have big trucks, concrete blocks brought in there to do the completion of the job, then that's where the impact money needs to go. We spent money to keep our roads safe. I've been insulted by BOCC every time I've addressed the problem, except last time. I know we've got new commissioners. Dr. Kennard was a decent one. He didn't insult me. Vacant land is being sold for the development at a very high rate. A policy needs to be implemented to prepare for the county's growth. The pictures I've given you is what a $300 load of crushed wet concrete looks 1 hour after being spread when a log truck smashed over it. We ordered 3 more loads that day, but the hauler said it was too wet to dump them, or we'd have wasted $300 a load, another $900. In 2006, Royal Coachman built a brick pool home across from me. The owners told me they'd spent $7,000 on the road so it could accommodate the heavy trucks before construction could begin. If you want to attract wealthier, higher class residents, you're going to have to ensure that we have county maintained roads for emergency service like septic, etc. Many insurance companies won't issue home insurance unless the home is on a county maintained road. Every time you collect an impact fee, we get the shaft. Okay, Teresa and Joe are still at Royal Coachman, and I called them this year, and they remember their clients, the Lutskys, and Joe said the limestone with milling was used for a road base. I mean, you talk to these people, you're nice, and they laugh at you because they know they can get by with it. And they say, well, they've got a right to access their property. No, you got to go across those roads and you tear them up. Now, that log truck, the last picture, is what my neighbor did with his tractor trying to smooth it out. I mean, I was up at the end of the road trying to collect money. He was down there spreading the lime rock. And then I look up and here comes a log truck by me. I go home and I see the damaged. And I mean, going down Gum Street, where the
Ms. Boone, could you conclude your comments? Your time has expired.
Okay, if you go, well, I'm done anyway.
Okay.
If you go down Gum Street, where we've put the lime rock base that's up like this, and those trucks, which are 80,000 pounds, have created gullies on each side of the lime rock and it's chipping away at the pavement we put down. I
Thank
mean,
you,
it's a
ma'am.
sight.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Anyone else? Going once, twice, seeing none. Board, do you have any comments from open to the public? No? Okay. Alrighty, thank you. We did not have any minutes to approve. Are there any staff announcements?
None at this time. I'll have some at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madam Attorney?
Yes, good morning. With regard to the application before you this morning, do you have any ex parte communications? It's V-2023-00002. And we'll start at the end with Commissioner Bass.
None.
Site visit.
None.
None.
Site visit? None.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, very good. If the applicant is present for V-2023-0002, could you please come to the podium and may we have the introduction, please?
Certainly. V2023-00002 for Mr. Baguette, 11589 West Clearwater Court, Homosassa, Florida. This is an aerial view of the subject property. This is looking east on West Clearwater Court. This is looking south on Clearwater Court. Looking west on Clearwater Court. Looking north at the subject property. And survey of the site plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So when we purchased this property,
Sir,
we
wait,
had,
could we have your name and?
I'm sorry, Charles Baguette, 11589 West Clearwater
Okay,
Court,
thank you.
Homosassa. When I purchased this property, we had a back deck that was ground level and in poor condition, and the driveway partially made of concreted in pavers that were terrible. So I made improvements by rebuilding the back deck and raising it because I felt like because of the high tides we have, I'd have less problem with items being washed into the canal as some of my neighbors experienced. So, and then I replaced the pavers with concrete. I'm here today to request a variance because I found that the rear deck that I should have had permitted and did not is too close to the high water line. So I'm being told that in order to be compliant, if I can get the deck within the 15 feet mark from the high water line, that I would qualify to apply for the variance. And to do that, I would have to pull the stairs that you see there within the footprint of the podium, which I have engineered plans to do and would be willing to do. And then they said also that I would need to adjust the gaps slightly in the deck to a ½ inch because they're slightly less than that currently, so that it wouldn't count against my ISR percentage, which is the problem with the concrete. Is I'm over my ISR percentage once I poured the concrete. After speaking with the county engineer and obtaining the survey, we discovered that 648, I think, square feet of my property is in the asphalt road, as you can see from the survey. So I feel like it's only, I don't have control over that 648 square feet. That's asphalt road, but I apparently own it according to the survey. So I feel like if I was at least given credit for that amount, according to the county engineer, I would be at 51%, which is 1% over my allowable amount. So my request is to allow my 1% overage in ISR so that my driveway may remain. I know there's been some questioning about flooding due to it, and there's been testimony by many of my neighbors that what flooding conditions we do experience on our street has not changed as a result of my improvements. So that's what I'm requesting is a 1% overage if I'm allowed the credit for the asphalt. And if I make the gaps in my deck right and pull the stairs in, I'd request to be able to keep my rear deck, and now would be compliant. After looking at my neighborhood, I've found that 25 of the 31 houses have some type of structure that's closer than the 35 feet that is the current requirement. So I'm not really asking for much more than anybody else or most everybody else has to some degree on my street. So I feel it would be fair to allow that. I think that's all I got.
Thank you. Are there any questions from staff?
Yes, please. You've seen the staff report, and the staff's calculations are about 67% impervious surface, where you're allowed 50. Can you talk about that a little bit? You can't really less out an easement, but talk
Right.
about what else, why you're so far over.
Well, because currently the back deck is counting against me because the gap is not quite a half inch, so they're considering that as impervious. So after talking to the engineer, if I adjust those gaps, then that percentage comes off of that 67. And then the rest of it was the asphalt. If I could credit that, that's, according to Ashley, would get me down to 51%.
Okay, the 15 feet is not a given, then you'd have to get approval from the variance.
Right.
Okay, I think
Yes,
you kind of said that was a approved, but it wouldn't be. You're in code compliance, and where is the status of that for this application? I know you were cited, you were found guilty, but what are you doing with code compliance right now?
Well, code compliance was waiting on this hearing so that I can make these adjustments to become compliant. If I was allowed the variance, then I could become compliant.
Right, I know they gave you 4 months, but I think that expired in June or July.
Right. I wasn't told, but I was under the impression from the hearing that I was given that amount of time to prepare and get this hearing scheduled. Then I was told that, well, that's not the case, that I would still be.
Right, there's a fine going. That's
Yeah,
why I wanted to
every
see where
day
you
I'm
were.
aware
Okay.
I'm being charged. So but it was misled or misunderstood, whichever, that the 4 months was to be able to get the application filed and have the hearing scheduled, but
Thank
that
you,
wasn't the case.
ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner
What's the
Barmes?
size of the deck that you're referring to?
20, I don't honestly know off the top of my head the exact size, but it is 20 by 20.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Commissioner Bramlett?
Did you rebuild the deck in the exact same footprint as the previous deck was? You just elevated it?
Yes, sir. I believe it is.
You
Other than maybe
believe
the
or you know it
stairs.
is?
I believe it is. I put it in the same place. I rebuilt it and raised it. If it's
So
it could
the
be off
deck
a foot,
before
it's-
was 15 feet away from the water?
yes,
Previously, it was
Yes.
just ground level.
yes, sir. I mean, it may have been 16 feet, but it was right there, the same area.
Okay, thank you.
Board, any other questions? Commissioner Facemeyer?
Mr. Beggett, did you receive the building permits for any of these improvements?
No, sir. I was under the opinion that if I was rebuilding what I already had, I didn't have to. That's obviously wrong. I didn't know that the previous owner hadn't permitted this either. I found that after the fact as well. Knowing what I've learned now through this process, obviously, is I should have attempted to apply for a variance in advance and then the permit to do all this, but I thought I was just fixing what was already there. I purchased it, it was already there. I just didn't know that it hadn't been previously permitted.
Are the streets in that community public street, county streets or private streets?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
We'll talk about
What was the question?
Are they public or private streets?
Staff will answer that.
in your presentation.
Is that all?
Thank you.
Are you, okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'm seeing none. Thank you very much, sir. May we have the staff presentation, please?
Ashley Baldwin.
Good morning.
Good morning. This application is for an after-the-fact two-part variance for the placement of an accessory structure within waterfront setbacks, less than 35 feet waterfront setbacks, and for the allowance to exceed the impervious surface ratio maximum of 50%. Property was served a code compliance notice of violation on September 6th, 2022. The code compliance violation specifically mentions a deck constructed without permits and poured concrete without permits. It is a waterfront property in Homosassa. It is in the Coastal Lakes and Rivers region. It is also in the coastal high hazard area and the CAZ flood zone. Here's a look at the poured concrete that was mentioned in the code compliance violation. It's 1,243 square feet of poured concrete. It was mentioned in previous permits that this area would need to remain rock and paver to maintain the ISR calculations for the property. It was, of course, poured without permits. The current calculations for ISR percentages include this portion, the home, the rear deck, and 643 square feet of the private right-of-way. The maximum is 50%. This is a picture of the rear deck. This is waterfront looking to the north of the property. During staff visit, I measured the deck to be 12.5 feet from the water line. Also, the steps encroach even closer towards the water than the deck. The average waterfront setback for permitted structures in the area of the 6 closest was 30.5 feet. Any structures that were closer were not permitted. Also, previous deck that was there on ground level was not permitted. It should also be noted that if this variance is approved, this deck would need to be redesigned to meet the comprehensive plan standards since it's more than 15 feet closer to the water. So with 12.5 feet, it would need to be redesigned regardless. Also, including the spacing between the boards is less than 1/2 inch, which would, if the spacing was 1/2 inch, it would not be counted towards ISR. This is some of the properties looking towards the east on Clearwater Court. You see their driveways. This is across the street looking south. And this is looking west on Clearwater Court. Here is a survey of the property.
Thank you. Does the applicant have any questions for staff? Mr. Beckett, do you have any questions for Ashley? Okay, come to the podium. Come to the podium so we can speak into the mic. Please.
Yeah, when you said the rear deck shows 12 feet from the water line, is that different than the distance to the high water line as it relates to the survey?
The survey has...
Ashley, in the mic, please.
The survey has a mean high water line somewhere in the water that is not on the seawall. The water, when I visited, was up to the seawall, which seems like that would be where the high water line always is. The survey mentioned a mean high water line that did not seem appropriate at the time that I visited.
Okay, because of tide changes, I was under the impression that through a professional surveyor that they dictate a high water line, not necessarily a tide water line. So this surveyor had documented on my latest updated survey that I submitted that I think my closest corner was 15 feet 4 or 5 inches from the main high water
Madam
line.
Chair, is
Do
this
you
a
have?
question?
I know. I'm going. Thank you. Do you have any more questions for Ashley? Okay. Thank you, sir. Does the board have any questions for staff?
So the previous deck that was rebuilt, it was unpermitted. So even with that particular deck being unpermitted, if somebody wanted to rebuild that deck, if they came in and asked for a permit, hey, I have this existing deck and I want to rebuild it, what would the process, what would happen in that? Would they be at that particular time at permitting, they would have been told, this was an unpermitted deck. You can't get a permit to rebuild it. You'll have to ask for a variance to even keep what you currently have, or they could have kept what they have. They just wouldn't have been able to rebuild it. Do you know the answers to any of those questions?
I think I know most of them. The deck cannot be elevated more than 12 inches from ground level, and it has to have 12-inch spacing or half-inch spacing between the gaps. So it would need to be at ground level and meet the waterfront setbacks of 15 feet minimum.
So he would have come in for a permit to rebuild what was already there, but what was there was unpermitted.
Correct. He would get a new permit for it.
His setback wouldn't have met then, though, right? He would have needed a variance.
If it was built in the same footprint as the deck that I measured at the time that I visited,
It would have been allowed?
no.
No,
It
okay,
would need to be 15 feet from the high
15
water line.
okay.
There's a couple caveats. You're in the right track. The previous deck was unpermitted. If they wanted to come in and try to permit it, they would have to either be on grade, or 12 inches less with a half-inch spacing, which it doesn't sound like they probably were. I don't know. Or they would have had to remove it and come before you for a variance for 15 feet or more, like
Well,
they are today.
Do we know what the previous deck was?
We don't know.
We don't know what that
any
was.
knowledge of that because it was
Right.
not permitted.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, my question is, so you're saying 15 feet. If he reconstructed, he still needs a variance for the 15 feet?
Yes. The deck currently, based on my calculations, was 12 and a half feet from the water.
And
from
that was the
seawall.
deck, not the stairs. She's not doing the
The
stairs.
stairs were even closer.
What I'm asking is, if he takes this deck down, he rebuilds it 15 feet from, new with a permit, is that permitted or they still need a variance?
If it's on grade with half-inch spacing and 15 feet, okay. We have that on grade provision, but we also have the average. If he wants to go up at all, it's 30 feet out there. So he'd
Yeah.
have to do 30 without a variance.
Okay,
That's why you're not seeing very many of those. That waterfront setback thing y'all did is working quite a bit.
very
As you can
good.
see.
Without, on grade, it wouldn't need the steps.
Probably true, but if you look at the relative, yeah.
Any other questions, Commissioner Bass?
Could you just clarify what you stated regarding the driveway and the pavers?
In a previous permit, I think when they built the home or something related, they did state that the ISR would need to be maintained by having concrete, no concrete, it would need to be pavers and rock in the driveway. That was in a previous permit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, Commissioner Stone?
I have a question, revisiting that driveway issue. Are there any other properties in the neighborhood that have concrete driveways similar to what Mr. Baggett has here?
Not that I saw. Theirs was the most concrete that I saw poured in the area. The other driveways seemed to be typical single car, maybe 2-car driveways.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just to clarify with Mr. Bass, it was a 2008 permit when the structure was put in, and they couldn't meet setback, it couldn't meet ISR, so that was a condition. We would not allow that now to say just do it gravel. They'd have to figure something out better. But at the time, we allowed them to say, okay, that's just going to be gravel out here to meet the ISR. So it was a condition stamped on the permit itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Facemeyer?
I may have missed it, but is the street private or public?
It's private.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. The public portion of the meeting will now be opened. If there is anyone present who would like to speak, please come forward to the podium. As a reminder, individuals are given 3 minutes to speak and organizations have 5 minutes. When speaking on this application, please address the board. If you have any documents that you want to be entered into the record, please provide a copy to the recording secretary. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm the immediate neighbor. I'm number 33 on your map at 11579 West Clearwater Court. And I read the previous court
Could you
permit.
state your name, please?
Sorry, Michelle Singleton.
Thank
I
you.
read the previous court records where Mr. Baggett states he was just trying to improve his home. I agree. Looks great, right? But these projects are negatively affecting my property, which is immediately next door to him. They affect my property, potentially affecting my values, my potential future sale. As far as the setback with the deck, this deck, if you look at the Google Maps image previously, this deck was completely elevated. I mean, it's completely different than what was there before, if you go back and look. I didn't bring those pictures 'cause they're online, but the elevation and the size of the deck blocks any view that I have from the canal of my property, from my back porch, my back deck area. Again, affecting any future sale of my property because I'm waterfront. I have canal. I want to be able to see it. Secondly, in June of 22, we applied for a permit to have an above ground pool put in. At that time, it was denied because setbacks, 35 feet, potentially going over my ISR. And during that process, Ms. Tiffany Johnson, who is at the Code Enforcement Department, wrote stating that because this back deck wasn't permitted of my neighbors, she couldn't use that to evaluate my setbacks. Therefore, I couldn't have what I wanted, which is fine. I think we have these rules in place for a reason. So again, giving a variance to one home out of 60 neighbors, I don't really agree with. I don't think is fair. As far as the concrete, my husband had 3 separate conversations with Mr. Baguette prior to the job being done. When we were friendly with them, we talked about like the pavers were being pulled up. We mentioned our concerns over flooding, and I'll allow my husband to speak on his conversations because I wasn't present for those. But ultimately, Mr. Baguette had already paid for the job and just proceeded with it. We also had a discussion with Mr. Mace, who is our HOA president, and he's the person that actually facilitated both of these unpermitted jobs for Mr. Baguette. And at the time, he stated, don't worry, we're going to slope the concrete in a way that there's no water going to your driveway, your carport. So we just let it go. It's going to happen. It is what it is. As they mentioned, the existing pavers that were on the property were already deemed over the ISR, and they should have been removed. But this concrete expanded way past what those pavers were even covering. So I wrote the board in August of 22 asking for support. There's constant water. His is dry, mine, there's erosion of my driveway. It's all the way up my carport. It's definitely negatively affecting my home, possibly future sale again with its excessive water sitting in front. I mean, we can have a light rain or heavy rain, it sits.
Ms. Singleton, could you conclude your comments?
Yeah, absolutely. So in closing, I just ask that you consider the effects of other residents before approving these variances. Again, we're an HOA neighborhood of 60 homes, and I just think approving variances in one home is not acceptable. So again,
ma'am.
it's
Thank
setting
you.
the standard of doing unpermitted work and asking for forgiveness after.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
My name's Mike Singleton. I live at 11579 West Clearwater Court. I'm not coming here just to complain. I'm coming here to just make what's right. And like my wife had said, I spoke to Mr. Baggett 3 times asking him, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. I think it's going to cause flooding. I truly believe that. And, we just talked back and forth, and then the final outcome was we got it. Well, I will be honest, the first rain came and I was like, well, maybe it's not going to make a big deal. It was just a light rain. I shouldn't say like major. Well, then we had more rain come. Well, it used to be, it would just be at the very beginning of my driveway. Then it was up in my carport after that. And again, we got pictures. We're like driving in, we'd come up here on the weekend and you go pulling in and dry, the water's up in my yard. So what I'm saying is it's just gotten to where the flooding is up in my yard. And for some reason, it comes my way. And as my wife had said, the HOA president had told me that they were going to slope it to where it didn't drain that way. It's the opposite. It does drain that way. So that is one thing I'd ask you, please, just to take a look at. And then as in the porch, as my wife had said, the porch is totally different than you can see on Google Earth. That it was, you cannot, the old porch, I could look down the canal and see all the way down. Now I see nothing. And as my wife said, I came down here, I filed my permitting like everybody else. It was going to be like one of them pools you put up in 30 minutes, take down in 30 minutes. I got denied because my neighbor's unpermitted deck. So I'm just asking you, please, look that over and take that into consideration.
Thank you very much. Next speaker? Anyone? Anyone else once, twice, three times? Okay. We're going to now close the public portion. Would the applicant like to have any rebuttal?
Yes, I just wanted to, out of respect of my neighbor and his concerns, there's a couple of comments I'd like to make. Number one, my deck replacement was there prior to them purchasing the property. So when they purchased their property, they knew what views they already had. And obviously it didn't alter their decision to purchase. So I don't see the concern there. As far as the driveway flooding, the slope of the driveway is the way we intended it to be and talked about it being. It does slope into the street like all the other driveways do. And the majority of all the other driveways do. And the flooding we experience on our street is no different now than it was prior to them even purchasing. It's been the same. There's our roads fill with water and then they go away. It's been that way for the last 20-something years, as has been documented and testified in the emails sent to the board that I'm hoping they got from the feedback from the other neighbors who all agreed there's been zero change in the water retention as a result of these my improvements. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we will bring this discussion to the board. Anyone want to start?
The fact that this area floods is only more of a argument for not giving any variance towards the impervious amount.
I'm sorry, can you speak
Oh, I'm
closer?
sorry.
That's okay.
I just think that the impervious ratio shouldn't be granted for variance because he's just saying the whole place floods anyway, so you're not gonna make it any better. That's it.
Anybody else? Commissioner Facemeyer?
I will not be supporting this application. I see some pictures that Mrs. Singleton had provided. And the driveway is made up clearly of pavers. The deck is nothing, the original deck looks nothing like what was constructed. And I think the applicant needs to resolve this with code compliance.
Thank you, Commissioner Facemeyer. Anyone else?
I'd just echo what Mr. Facemeyer said. Coastal high hazard area, it's not in compliance with the comprehensive plan, the land development code. There's a lot of different things that are wrong with this particular situation. Ignorance of the law does not defend you from it. Had he come and got a permit, he would have known what he was allowed to do and what he wasn't allowed to do. The fact that all the neighbors do unpermitted work doesn't, relieve him of his duty to know what should and shouldn't be done. So I'm not in favor.
Thank you, Commissioner Barmez. You had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to repeat everything they just said, but my biggest thing that I have a problem with is the HOA president acting as a contractor and making decisions, agricultural decisions for the property and for the community and doing unlicensed activity. That's my biggest concern. So I'm not in support of this application. And for a purpose of a motion, the Planning and Development Commission finds application number V2023-00002 inconsistent with the Citrus County Land Development Code and is not in keeping the intent of the policies of the Citrus County Comprehensive Plan, and that this board denies the application based upon the evidence and testimony presented and the staff report and conclusions regarding this petition.
Thank you. We have a motion by
Second.
Commissioner Barmez and a second by Commissioner Bramlett. Any further discussion? I would just like to say that I agree with everyone who spoke on this application. I find that it also doesn't meet the test. Mr. Baguette, this is, we've done a lot of work with setbacks and variances, and I think you have an opportunity to do something, but this application I can't support. It doesn't meet the test. So with that being said, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Nay. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Okay, now we will be moving on to an ordinance amendment.
Yes, okay, so there's a bunch of land development code proposed changes in here. Some are from the commissioners. If we can go ahead and, I've got this, I'm not gonna bother you about it. I'm gonna jump to the end if we can, because I have a representative from engineering here, and I know he probably loves our meeting and all, but I'm not gonna make him sit through all of it. So let's go to the engineering section, which is section 15 and section 16 of the ordinance packet. And I did put some of the highlights up here of the changes to talk about, just to focus on those first, and so I can let Bill get out of here when he's ready. The first thing is section 15 talks about the finished floor shall not be a minimum than lower than the FEMA 100-year flood elevation. For whatever reason, we have a elevation variance application. It's not a variance, I'm sorry, an elevation waiver application with Public Works that allows people to go in relation to the crown of the road. Someone has thought that that overrides FEMA. It doesn't. FEMA is not related at all to the finished floor elevation waiver. So that statement states right now, it's not related to FEMA. We're done. And Bill, I'll apologize, but if I'm saying something wrong, you're going to jump up and tell me, right? Yes, he would. Okay. So that's section 15, but we also have something in the bottom of there that the acceptance justification is above the highest point of the adjacent road. We've always used the word crown. That's somewhat debatable, shouldn't be, but it is. So for engineers to make it very clear, it's the highest point of the road, and they're not accepting assumed elevations. That's an engineering thing. I can't explain why that's bad, but it does sound bad for assumed elevations. So section 15 is talking about those changes. Section 16 is also engineering's driven, and that is saying that commercial development that accesses a unimproved or substandard roadway. So it did say unclassified. That's pretty important, simply because classified roads are collectors or arterials. They're 19, they're 484, they're 486. This is an unimproved or substandard county road. So we have a lot of those. And if you're doing commercial, they're saying you need to upgrade that portion of the roadway to county standards. It's not just for unclassified roads. We may know it's a classified road. It might be a local, it might be a minor collector, but if it's not current standards, then they're going to have to fix that. So this is pretty important for commercial development. And you also see in section 16, they are changing from frontage and service roads or cross-access. That's limited right now to principal and minor arterials and major collectors, and it left out minor collectors. I don't think we ever really thought that we developed so much we'd get development on minor collectors. Now we are. For example, with the Coochie Trail. There are commercial lots there. We're getting commercial development. So that change in section 16 would also bring those roadways, those minor collectors in, and also have to do frontage roads or cross-access. So any questions on the very quick engineering changes while I still have my engineer here?
Commissioner Bass?
I have one, if I could ask the engineer.
Sorry, Bill,
why-
I gotta come up.
If you go back, Joanna, to where you talk about the 100-year flood, it's right there. Great. So you say the finished floor shall be a minimum no lower than the FEMA 100-year flood elevation. Why haven't you looked at requiring 1 foot above base floor elevation so that none of the living area could be impacted by the 100-year flood?
My bill of flame, and just to be clear, I'm not an engineer, I'm an engineer intern with technical services. So there's a section earlier in the code that covers finished floor of a single-family residence, and it says you will be 12 inches above the highest point of the road or the FEMA 100-year floodplain. This is the same language. We're just including it here because we've had people try to use this as a waiver for the FEMA code. So all this is trying to like match what's earlier in the code. The waiver itself is basically to prevent people from building lower than the road and then trying to get the county to fix it for them, because that's a problem in public works. I've been with the county for 12 and a half years, and I used to work in road maintenance, and we would get a lot of people that would build a road, build a house low, and then expect us to fix it for them. So this is basically just to protect us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other question? Denise?
Would it be helpful, Joanna, if we reference that other code section somehow? I mean, I understand.
We could. This is not the FEMA elevation standard, but we're saying, by the way, this is not a waiver from that in another section. But we can put, refer to section as a clarity. Yeah, absolutely.
this way they're not gonna think that, I get it. I get the comment, so.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Anything else for my engineering intern? Sorry.
I don't see anything.
All right,
Joanna.
thank you. Not that you can stick around if you want to. I know it's really riveting stuff here, so. All right, we'll go back to the beginning somewhat. I'm not gonna go page by page. I did some highlights, so if there's something that I'm not touching upon, and again, Ms. Scragg asked me earlier, it is the cross strike through underline that we're asking you to consider, and not anything else from that. The existing code is the existing code, and we know we have some changes. So one thing that Dr. Wilburn, who's in the audience, mentioned to us is that some of the houses of worship standards were not consistent with other standards you'd think would be like that. A community center, a fraternal lodge, some things like that. They were allowed in HDR, LIND, et cetera, and not churches. So it wasn't meant to exclude churches. Those are very similar uses. You can look at a fraternal lodge and a church is some similarity. So what it's doing is changing in these land uses. So in HDR right now, it's a conditional use, but you can have an assisted living facility. That's not right. So changing that to permitted. In the two industrial categories, they are added as allowable uses. Yes, we have very high intense industrial uses, and we didn't really contemplate a church wanting to go there, but they can do so if this is approved. And then the last three, the rec, mobile home park, and RVP, when I say added for parks only, when you put something that's a commercial type non-residential use in, for example, an RV park, it's supposed to only serve the residents. The church would be the same. But if an RV park wants to put a church in there, it is to serve residents of that community and not outside. Now, all these sites would come before you guys, and I assume they could ask for an outside commercial thing. We occasionally see that, especially in RV parks, but they're meant to serve the park only, and that's what the code would say until they came before you for relief. So that's what's happening with the houses of worship. And stop me, you guys do, if there's questions. All right, so development in the coastal high hazard area. This is something coming from the commissioners. They are concerned about impacts on the coastal high hazard area. There's a certain gas station on the west side that has been in the news crazy and almost gives me nightmares. But we're trying to address that and any related items. So what would impact the west side? What would impact water quality? What would impact springs? So all these uses, I tried to list some of them here, would require a PUD instead of a CU, or instead of sometimes by right for these uses, if they're in the coastal high hazard area only. They would require that extra step of a PUD. So gasoline sales and service was because of their tanks. Laundry, dry cleaners, they have those chemicals. I think they still do, although I could be wrong. A shooting range, funeral home with crematorium, those are pretty obvious, but also car repair. Boat repair. Those things also have the oils and stuff similar to the gas stations, and that's why these would trigger a PUD. It's quite a difference. Some of them don't require a PUD right now. Some of them do, such as outside storage and RV, welding, lawn care, solid waste haulers, and vets with outside kennels. So there's a lot of uses here. We can discuss that. You'll see them in the land use tables. They're all getting pushed into a PUD category in the coastal high hazard area.
Joanna, why trade contractors with outside storage?
Because that is usually when it's a trade contractor and outside storage, because we already require outside storage as a PUD anyway. So if they were just doing outside storage, a lumber yard, or they want to store RVs outside, that's already a PUD. But we did not include building trade contractors with outside storage, and that probably was an oversight on our part. So right now, if you want to store things outside, you want to have a business with mostly storage outside, that should have triggered a PUD anyway. But we left the trade contractors out probably by error. We should have grabbed those up when we started making car parking outside the storage areas. So that's why that one's included. It's not meant to, it's meant for primarily outside storage. So if a trade contractor had,
well, let's say you owned an AC business and you had condenser pads or something of that nature, a small scrap pile that you have to take care of or whatever. This is outside storage. So now if there is a contractor or something that already exists in that area and they try to do any expansion or whatever, then now they need to get a PUD?
In the coastal high hazard area, yes, that's what's being proposed, that they would have some kind of impact perhaps to water quality in the area.
Yeah.
Whether you support it or not, that's why we're here, to
Yeah.
see what you think. Any comments on those, or keep going?
I have a question about
Sure.
lawn care operations.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
That means not their office, but where they're, usually the lawn care people have areas where they are storing all their equipment and all their trucks and all their spray equipment and things like that. So we're looking for
I'm talking about like pesticides.
Yes.
Because when I read lawn care,
Mm-hmm.
like that sounds like mowers and weed eaters.
And this isn't existing in the table, and if that happened, it would come to me, and I would look. But I agree that, mowers, the large mowers that have perhaps oil, where we're saying that you can't do car repair and boat repair. The mowers stored outside in a coastal high hazard area, it's questionable. And again, that's why we're bringing these before you, is we looked at things that might have an impact on the water quality or on springs.
I think that needs tightened up. There's a lot of gray area in lawn care operations.
There is. Our code is full of gray areas. So
That's what we're trying to clean up, though.
yeah, we are, well, to a point. What this is doing actually is just putting another layer of looking at, I'm drawing not the word, for the county commissioners for a PUD in the coastal area. So if someone comes before you and they just have mowers, or someone comes before us and they have a couple condensers in the back, they may say, yeah, fine. Or they may say, this is awful because it's close to such and such and doesn't belong. And that's what this is making that extra level.
But a PUD is expensive.
Can be, yeah. Relative to other counties, not so much, but I understand your point. Yeah.
Any other questions? I think we can continue.
Okay. All right, so similar, I moved this one up a little bit, but section 3220 it does have setbacks for existing automobile service stations, particularly from residential areas, because that's come up before. They often are 24-hour. They have some noise associated, some lights associated. So right now they are 25 feet from any residential lot or residential developed property, but we're also adding proposal that they're prohibited from locating within 500 feet of a spring run, sinkhole, or contributing stream. And that is actually language that's already in your code for other uses, such as point sources, where they're going to have some kind of impact to springs or impact to water, not gasoline stations. But this would add it in. Now at the bottom, Mr. Stillwell, who I certainly appreciate his impact too, thought that maybe a wetland connected to the aquifer would also be something to add in here. The gas pumps and gas storage tanks should not be there within 500 feet of a connected wetland to the aquifer as well. So that would be something to consider.
Why does it say except for the Cross Florida Barge Canal?
That is existing language in there, and they're not part of the coastal high hazard. It wasn't anticipated that point sources would be impacting that. Right or wrong, the manatee element excludes that area too. That's just historically something Citrus County has left out. Is it correct environmentally?
Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, it's exactly word for word what's in there. But again, this is your time if you want to change those. I don't think it's likely to get
If we're trying to protect water.
Yeah, I don't think it's likely to get a gas pump within 500 feet of the Cross Florida. There's really not commercial up there, but it doesn't mean you can't. Yeah,
You never
it might
know
be.
in
It
the
might be in the
future.
future. Yep.
If they get a port up there.
All right. So I'm going to need all your input on that. The port. Okay, let's not go there.
Excuse me, Joanna.
Uh-huh.
So are you going to add the connected wetland to this?
I wanted to bring that up and see what you thought. I thought that was a good point.
I think it's a great idea and we should include it.
Okay.
And then following up on what Dave said, do we want to work on the Cross Florida Barge Canal and correct that? Because Dave, you bring up a valid point. We're trying to correct all these issues as we go, so why not address it now? If we're already sending this to the Board of County Commissioners, why not add one more thing to get it corrected?
Okay, so we have a consensus on that too. The barge canal shouldn't be a less out.
Yeah.
Well, what is your opinion? I mean, you say just because it was there, I mean.
As a planning standpoint, I don't have any reason to have that in there. It's just already in there in language, so.
What happens if somebody wanted to put a marina or something like that, right? To be with a PUD. They would have to come in with a PUD and they would have to say, okay, here's how I'm going to protect this fuel and whatever a PUD would require for a marina on the barge canal, then it would be allowed. But right now we're just saying, if you're going to do this, then you have to come in and do a PUD. Except if you were on the barge canal, then you could just go ahead and do it.
Correct, if you had commercial land.
Yeah, that doesn't
yes.
make a lot of sense to me.
Understood. So consensus to get rid of that little disclaimer, absolutely.
Yeah.
And add the connected wetlands.
It would be much easier than that for a fuel barge to just go inside the canal and spud down and start dispensing.
We're not gonna go
Fuels
there and
to-
regulate barges, but I get it. I get it. Yeah, so
Madam
that disclaimer goes, I'll propose that as a strike through.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
May I just have an opportunity to say I agree with Mr. Stillwell?
Okay.
And,
Very good.
and we have it on tape, so he can replay that whenever he wants to.
And now he can retire.
Yeah.
His work is done.
Is that all it took? Oh, gosh, we should have done that now. All right, so pods. Already in our code, it says that manufactured housing cannot be used as a residential storage building. So would add pods, semi-trailers, and vehicles as storage buildings. We're getting more and more of these beautiful structures. Commissioners are not verbally not thrilled about the look of these, the appearance of these. So if this language passes, they couldn't have the manufactured housing. They also can't use a vehicle. People want to take the wheels off and then get it permitted. Trucks, no. The trailers and take the wheels off. Pods, take the wheels off and then keep it there forever. Not the greatest idea. So because manufactured housing is prohibited, I have no problem with prohibiting here. I had to find one without a name on it. You don't see any particular, I'm using pods, but it's not the pod company, it's the idea.
I sort of
sorry.
want to talk about that a little
Absolutely.
bit.
Are they called? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Like those containers.
That's
We're talking about containers.
We're talking about containers,
Like,
yes.
like that right there.
Yes.
You're saying that you can't, this new language says not at all.
It doesn't say not at all, it says not at all permanently. And we'll get to the temporary uses where people are moving into their house and they have those in their driveway for a little while. But yes.
People are using these as homes and they're stacking them, and then they're adding facades.
And that would not
it
be a
doesn't-
storage building. So that's not a residential storage building. That would be a house.
But you didn't let me finish.
I'm sorry.
What if I took one of those containers and I wanted to dress it up and it didn't look like a container? It makes it much cheaper and easier to create a storage unit or a storage shed.
Mhm.
What if I wanted to do that with some facade requirements like we require for everything else?
Right. I would say if you're using the frame of a pod or whatever and you turn it into something else, it's no longer a pod. That would be a house. It'd have to meet Florida Building Code, give the character of a house.
It's a storage though. I'm going to use it for storage. I'm going to put it in my backyard
Okay.
and use it as storage because now I can just put this square there and then I can just frame on it and make it look a little bit more like a regular shed.
This is saying no for manufactured housing, pods, and trailers. If what you bring before me happens to have the underlying frame of a pod, but I have no clue it's actually one because it's been changed so much, then sure.
So like no unimproved
Yeah.
containers or pods.
Yeah, I don't want to say that, unimproved because then they paint it and they're good, I think that would be, I think this is pretty clear. And then if someone turns in something and it's clearly just a pod or just a residential, a storage trailer, no, that would be a no. But if it's like the container homes, I would not allow a container to be lived in, but by the time we see them, they're houses. They've been engineered and they meet Florida Building Code.
So then somebody puts one of these in their backyard, and after this is passed in the new ordinance, then what? Then it's a code compliance?
Correct.
Because I've sold multiple houses with these in the backyards, multiple of them too, actually, 2 and 3 of them.
Right. So it is for after. I mean, the code goes into effect when it goes into effect.
Right.
I think Ms. Lynn, are you trying to say something?
No, I'm just saying the commissioners have gotten many complaints
From neighbors and stuff.
from neighbors about these things being in yards. That's what's
Yeah.
precipitated this.
I mean, they're unsightly. That's not, it's no denying it. But I think
Right.
that if you could dress it up and make it as less unsightly, but what you're saying is if somebody did that, then you would say, okay, well, I don't consider it a container anymore.
Correct. It would be how the appearance, if they've engineered it so differently or changed it so differently. And remember, code compliance is acting on complaints. So if someone has 20 acres and it's in the back and nobody sees it, but.
Okay.
Joanna, I don't agree with having the containers as part of this, but if we are going to, if this board has a consensus, and I know what you're saying about the county commission, I personally don't understand why we would, if they're not in a deed restricted area, why are we going to change the law to regulate what people want to store their stuff in their own property? But that I wouldn't agree with, and I would tell anybody who would complain about that, that same thing. But should we use the term containers versus pods? Pod is a brand name. I don't know if.
It is. And I did summarize this a little bit in the, what's the wording I used exactly?
I think it's generally called a Connex box.
I think that's a brand name actually.
That's a brand name as
Yes.
well. Not trying to pick on the Pods company specifically,
They're
although.
just containers.
Containers. I mean, they sell them on 19, it says containers.
Yeah.
They sell them on 19?
You have
Yeah.
address?
Yeah, they do, but that's an
not make it a
unpermitted
home
business,
assessor
so we don't want to
casino?
go there.
I do.
They're stacked up like 50, 60 feet high.
Yeah, that's not a permitted site, so.
You look stunned.
Well, it's not a permitted site.
Right.
It's very ugly too. But whatever.
Code compliance is available if anyone wishes to
Yeah.
make a complaint.
Yeah, we do act on complaints regularly. I'm trying to
Remember,
see the language I
doesn't
use.
staff doesn't initiate any code
No,
compliance.
can't.
Can't.
People are disappointed in that, yes, they would like to be able to do it themselves, have us do it. Okay, so getting kind of a mixed bag on including these, but possibly using containers.
Look, I understand taking old vehicles and taking the tires off, and that's different. But
trailers, yeah.
I just don't understand. I mean, if you look at this container versus like a manufactured shed or something, yeah, obviously they can dress those up in a different way. Some of them are metal. I really don't see why we would want to regulate something like this.
Understood.
Personally.
What the language says is vehicles, trailers, semi and or utility, manufactured housing, pods and similar units, and mobile homes is exactly the language in the code. I just summarized it for the slide. But understand, not all of you are on board with this one.
Are you gonna have the picture in the code?
I can.
I think that
yeah.
helps identify what you're talking about.
Agreed.
Or maybe add the word shipping container. Or container.
Pods and similar units.
Pods,
Pods are
comma,
different than
containers.
I would say
pods,
shipping
comma,
containers.
Pods or shipping containers and similar units instead of pods.
I'm not sure I even agree with
Or
this
Connex
entire
boxes.
addition, honestly, but I'm sort of in the camp with Stacy.
Okay.
If you don't want a square box in your neighbor's backyard, then move to a deed restricted area that restricts those. Because if I own my property and I want to buy a container because it's a cheap use way to store some stuff, that's my property. If you don't like it, move to Sugar Mill Woods.
So I'll convey that there's a mixed bag on this one, and I think we'll probably get the same from the commissioners, but we'll
I
see.
don't know about mixed bag. I see two.
Okay. Three. Okay.
That's probably, give them something definitive.
Thank you. Okay, the other four,
It's.
No one's asking you to.
But you live in a deed restricted community.
I do.
But even
Unintentional.
Intentional.
Correct.
even so, I still wouldn't want to. If I lived on a piece of property that wasn't deed restricted, I wouldn't want to look at one of those in my backyard or my neighbor's backyard. I think it's gross and ugly. So I would agree with the other that they shouldn't be there. I think we should control them.
okay, I think I have enough to convey.
I've been by that place on 19 and it is ugly. It's just ugly.
Sounds like I need to get out more.
Not permitted. All right, temporary uses, and we are going to talk about storage containers in just a moment on this. But the first one that's come up, and the reason that temporary uses were being
Can
looked
you just
at,
tell me what page we're on? Because I like to follow along.
you know, all
I'm
right.
sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. I made
24,
this,
David.
I made this so that I wouldn't have to keep
Well,
going
'cause I
back
keep
and looking.
turning
But
and
I
then I'm
get
missing
it.
it.
All right.
24.
We're in these strike-throughs, and it wouldn't be that far. So
She's
Oh, we
on
went
a
backwards
table.
because we were on gas.
it's the table for
We're
temporary
jumping all over the place.
uses.
I'm 24. I'm on 24.
Okay, I found it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry for temporary uses, and I literally cut and paste exactly what's in your packet on here. So on the slide is exactly what's in your packet.
Your pages
Don't
are
worry about
different for some reason.
All pages are numbered differently.
That's to test you too.
If I failed the test.
The clerk uses Civic Clerk for these, and they do renumber, and I'm sorry. The exact thing on your documents are right here. I literally just cut and paste. So anyway, temporary uses. So someone came before the county commission and said, I do a haunted house, and I'm only allowed to have 14 days, and I want 30. Okay, he doesn't do 14 days. He's allowed when he asks for 4. So right now, what it says is fairs, festivals, similar outdoor events are 4 days per event with a maximum of 3 per year. We've had that for an awfully long time. Now you see at the top what they have to provide with these kind of applications is they have to come to the building division for a temp permit. It shows you how they're going to come in and off for driveway, where they're going to park, how they're dealing with restrooms, and how they're dealing with their trash. And then they come before the building division, and they'll give them that temp permit for up to 4 days. That's worked really well for us. Things like Oktoberfest and those kind of things have been fine. 4 days is plenty. Church revivals that come in 2 or 3 days. This person wants it to be 30, so this is up for discussion on what y'all think. I think when we're getting in 30 events as a planner, I'm concerned. I would almost want a permit for that. That's a use. We're getting into more than this temporary event, go in, go out thing. I'm concerned. They do have to have building permits for structures when we're getting into long-term occupancy. Special events, if they're a fair and a festival and they have a tent, they do have to get permitted through building and fire for that tent and show anti-flammable, et cetera, and ingress, egress. Am concerned again with the 30 days. That's not something I could support, but it's brought before you because they asked the commissioners to do so. So what do you think?
Why can't you support the 30 days?
30 days bothers me because we're getting into when people require permits for things. If you're going to be in one place for 30 days for a temporary event, it's not really a temporary event. It's there a whole month. So I would think you would have to come through permitting. I don't want porta potties for 30 days. That bothers me. Temporary parking and temporary trash, that's fine for a couple days. But when you're getting into 30, I think you're impacting an area significantly.
Joanna, is there, I'm sorry.
Would you be willing to look at something, say 2 weeks instead of 30 days? You know, just to try to avoid some additional work for this applicant or for an applicant?
Well, it's only this one applicant that I'm aware of that ever wanted them more, but I think 4 days is working. I don't really think there's a need to expand it, but that's why we're here to talk about.
Can we add language where the land development director could administratively, on a case-by-case basis, make a decision on something that were longer?
While I appreciate the ability, I have no criteria to say you're good, you're not. I don't go to haunted houses, so we shouldn't do them. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Does this mean that the temporary car sales locations?
These are fairs and festivals. These are not temporary car sales. Well, those they have seasonal sales and outdoor retail sales, and you'll see that up there. So you'll see it farther up on the thing and not being discussed. So seasonal sales like Christmas trees, 90 days per calendar year with 30 days at a time.
Madam Attorney.
Yes, I would just say, I don't know how many of you have been to the neighborhood Christmas light displays or the neighborhood haunted houses. You really have to look at the added impact on the neighborhood when these things are done. And, 30 days of, Christmas music blaring to choreographed Christmas lights is not.
It's a small world.
And these usually aren't in remote areas. If you're doing a fair or a festival, it's generally not somewhere that's remote.
You want to sum up with bar humbug?
No, I'm just saying, I know a couple neighborhoods that the neighbors have to deal with the added, imagine the traffic that comes to watch the choreographed Christmas lights.
Joanna, do you say that there's only been one request for this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm against it.
That was easy.
Well, if you had 20 people or 6 people wandering in every single day saying we got a problem with this, then we got a problem. But one person is not a problem to change the whole system. So
right,
that's
and also alcohol sales, for example, are usually 1, 2, or 3 day events with the state. So it's working. The people that have some kind of event at their church, but they happen to have alcohol. Good for them, and they can get up to 3 days. And so that's working. You know, the Homosassa seafood, 3 days, a maximum. So I think 3 days is working. I think 4 days is kind of extra. I can't possibly think of 30 on this little bypassing permit idea. But
And they need to know that they can't put their signs in the right of way either.
that's not allowed, right? It is
But
not.
that's a code compliance issue.
It is, and by the time they get out there, the event sometimes is over. So yeah.
Oh, but if it was 30 days long.
If
then-
30 days, yeah, we could definitely get them on those signs.
I'm going to say something too. I agree with Commissioner Stone.
Oh my.
Wow.
That's even more startling than Miss Lynn and Mr. Stu. Oh my goodness.
And I will go along with Commissioner Worthington and Commissioner Stone also.
Okay, that you don't support any change to this particular item.
Yeah, me neither.
Thank you. That is staff is in agreement with that one. All right, so another thing that the commissioners have asked to be considered is temporary uses in general, and that's pods. And here you see pod. It's in the existing code, although we can change that to containers. On site, when not associated with construction, are allowed 2 occurrences per address per year, up to 14 days. So that's current. You also are allowed one of those if you've got an active building permit for up to 1 year, and you can have an extension for up to another year if you've got an active permit. So, people use them to park on their lot, on their land when they're getting a house built. Right now, they can do that. They ask us for it and we allow it. We also allow temporary occupancy of an RV, 2 weeks per address per year. And that construction-related activities, same thing. RVs with an active permit, 1 year up to a 1 year extension. My understanding is the commissioners are getting a lot of complaints about this. We do constantly have people that are living in RVs in code compliance. They're not really using this provision, but it's 2 weeks per year, period. But should we allow the RVs while they have a house built? And should we allow the pods when they're having a house built? And should we allow the RVs coming to visit you for up to 2 weeks a year? So that's what you're being asked to consider today, is whether these are appropriate. This is existing language.
I believe the RV and the storage container on the property while it's under construction, if people are having an issue with that, then I have an issue with those people.
Okay. What about the rest of the board?
Well, my question is, I would be fine with it also, as long as, there has to be a well and all that built, right? Because where are they putting their waste? Are they dumping it? They're going to dump it? You really believe they're going to dump it?
491 and 486, the construction is going on. There's a construction trailer that's 40 feet long, and there's probably about 4 of those shipping containers where they're putting this stuff in.
But
And it's gonna be there for
the
a year
construction
and a half.
trailers on that commercial side are permitted. This is on association with residential permits, frankly. But yeah, that's true. I agree with you, but construction trailers get permitted because they have some floor loading type issues with the building permit.
And I didn't mean well, I meant septic.
Yeah, so in the instances that I've seen where people have done that in the past, they get the well and the septic installed prior to.
But should we put any type of language like that so that it is?
We can. I've talked.
Do you want them to take a little hose from the RV and bring it over to the septic tank? And
That's what
is that-
people do.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what people
They do now.
For only 2 weeks, though.
But is there any enforcement for this? If
No.
the guy-
Oh, I'm sorry.
There is
Wrong.
enforcement, code compliance constantly. Every month we have people living in RVs. It's constant.
Yeah, it's
They
very prevalent.
regulate it
It's
to
everywhere.
address, 2
Everywhere.
weeks, and then it's hard to prove they're living in it, but once we can establish that someone's living there, it's common every month. I can't believe it. Remember a month when we didn't have one before the special master. So that's common. So that last one of 2 on improved property for 2 weeks a year is a problem. But then again, you've got people coming to visit. That was what it was intended for. I've got a friend, neighbor, whatever, relative coming to visit for 2 weeks a year. They live in their RV in our driveway. That's what we allow right now.
And during that 2 weeks, are they taking the waste and putting
It's
it
not.
in the?
It's not discussed, so I don't know.
Yes, they are.
Oh, please don't extend that.
I'm not trying to extend it. It's the idea at all is what the commissioners would like us to consider. Should we continue to have that? not extending it more than 2 weeks, but should we even have that option first of all?
Oh, remove the 2
Remove
weeks.
the
Talking
2
about
weeks
take it where
period.
people can't stay on an RV on a residential property at all.
Correct.
If
Unimproved.
there's first a residential
Improved,
unit.
right.
So you're looking to
Right.
put them into an RV park versus being on someone's.
Right. For 2 weeks a year, we allow you to be in a park in an improved residence's driveway and live in it. And is that appropriate? First of all,
Not really.
it's
People are
what we
gonna
have
do
right
what
now.
They want to do anyway. Like, I feel like we're wasting time with this. But
It's enforced.
they're already doing more than this anyway.
Right, but neighbors sometimes want, like when the neighbors complain to the commissioners want to have an answer for them. And
This
right
is the
now,
answer. Isn't this already in there?
So
We're
you like
saying
the existing
they wanna
language is what you're
remove it.
saying.
They want to,
they want to just take it out
Yes,
They
so
want
that
us to
when the
consider it.
neighbors
or
complain.
add to it.
Consider, take a look at it.
So make the commissioners want it to not be at all, where they can just say it's not allowed. That if they're doing it, it's not allowed. They're not trying to say give them a little bit more opportunity where they can do 2 weeks at Christmas, a week at Thanksgiving, summertime scallop season. No, they just want to remove it completely. So it's a very definitive line. We have a line of demarcation. It's not allowed at all.
Well, I can never speak for all the commissioners. What I'm saying is that they're getting complaints, and right now we allow 2 weeks per year, per address. And is that appropriate? Should we allow that, or should we just not even allow that?
The problem is whether it's temporary, or when a home is under construction and we allow somebody to park in the yard while they're building the home. There's no way to know when that window starts and stops. That's.
Well, code will go out there, and then they'll go out there 14 days later, and check. And if they're still there, then that's a
But if
complaint.
somebody, in the case of somebody constructing a new home, okay, we get all the permits, hired a contractor, then all of a sudden, there's a delay with a roofer, a delay with, a cabinet guy, and all of a sudden, you got an RV in an unfinished, next to an unfinished home 3 years later.
Well, the permit has to stay active. So if the permit expires, then they're in violation. And those kind of situations are the ones where we would extend it if they ask. If it has to go beyond a year, we'd go to 2. When this is appropriate is when I see people with fire damage, for example, they need somewhere to live. RV, while they have an active building permit to rebuild, totally makes sense. But all permits are allowed to ask for an RV right now, any house. Now, we don't allow them when they have replacing 4 windows. We've had people ask, but no. But if you've got a new house or a new mobile even, mobile not really, but a new house, right now they can ask for RV occupancy there on the site while it's active. And is that appropriate?
Well, we live in a hurricane zone, and if somebody's house gets flattened, that's what they do. They move into their RV next to it, and they rebuild their house. So I don't think we should restrict that.
Okay. We don't have anything about disaster, but we can put something in there and specify it's just for that, or right now it's for construction-related activity, so active permits.
I definitely think, like Mr. Stone just said, because that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm over on the west side, it's happening right now. People's houses are flooded. The other thing with this whole 2-week temporary deal, like the code compliance is going to come out there, and then I can just shut my RV down, and my friends can hang out in the house for an hour while he walks around and then go, we're not out there. What are you talking about?
Don't make things hard for code. There's always ways around.
Right.
I agree with you. Your point's taken, but there's always ways around things.
That's why I think that it's just a waste of time. I think that just leave it the way it is. They have something that's already there. If you change it, then these people are going to be mad, and these people are going to be upset because you're not making it what they wanted it to be.
Okay, so let's
People
get
are
a
gonna
consensus then.
circumvent it
First of
anyway.
all, the 2 weeks per unimproved property per year. Consensus that stays all
I'm
good.
fine with it.
Okay, nods or whatever. Okay, portable storage units not associated with construction activity up to 14 days.
I don't agree with it because I didn't agree with the change from before.
Well, this only allows them then. Okay, all right.
What about like in times of disaster? Because those are being used right now too. They're being put in driveways. People are bringing some of their belongings that didn't get flooded, storing them in that.
Right. Our code allows us to give some understanding with damage. We have a whole thing about replacement of damaged structures and what happens in those kind of situations.
Okay, so it's already in there then.
Right. So I would have no. would not want to take something to a special master because they're damaged and, oh my gosh, look, they put this outside, you know?
They need a permit anyway, right, for disaster repairs?
Yes, and if they have it,
So that
but
would
sometimes
be
they're working
covered.
on insurance, but yes. Okay, so pods, with the active building permits, do you want it related? Do you think it should have a disaster limit or any RVs? The RVs and pods when you have an active construction permit?
I think that
I'm
those
fine
should
with
be
it.
100% allowable.
I mean, I'd like them to have a second.
I got two. The rest of you, yeah, no concerns?
I think if you have a fire or a flood or something like that, you gotta have a place to live, and insurance companies usually bring these in and set them up.
But that's the
Do they have to
disaster
get a CO
idea.
for them?
hmm
Do they have to get a CO for them, the temporary housing, do it after?
An
the fire?
RV, no. But you would
I'm
need,
not talking an RV, I'm talking insurance companies bringing a mobile home, and they.
they would absolutely need a permit and a CO for that, yeah.
I thought-
Yeah, if they're bringing in a mobile home or a tiny house or something, those are
Yeah.
permits, yeah. All right, got enough for that, I think. Talked about finished floor and commercial, so I'm done. Any other things that you wanted to talk about that I might have missed? I tried to summarize everything here.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you said that the waterfront setback, that was working pretty well, there was talk before about revisiting that.
And we did
We did it.
revisit, yeah, we did revisit it too. We talked about with pools, and we had a lot of debate here about pools. You probably remember and you could do the progressive pools where there are different levels and should they be elevated. We had a ton of discussion about the decks and here at this board for that when we brought it back. And so, yes, I agree. I wanted to tell you, waterfront setbacks, boy, yeah, Al made a huge change. How many times have you had a variance before you now? Very, very rarely. They're working. And even when people, it might not be exactly what they want, when they get an average, they're like, oh, I can do that. And they're very happy and we move on. We hardly ever see them brought. You know, some applicants still want to come before you for whatever reason. But yes, it absolutely is working. We allowed it for pools, but it's in-ground pools is what happened,
Okay.
and not enclosures. But
Okay.
the pools were added in as that second look.
Very good. Anyone else have any questions?
We're always playing with the LDC and trying to fix things. So Commissioner Strag pointed out something earlier. The language was kind of misleading, and we're always trying to fix that. That's what this is. I'm sure we'll bring you more. Your next thing is the workshop with the County Road 486 Interchange Management Consultants. So
Thank you, Joanna. Board, we need a 10-minute break, though, before we start. Be back at 10:30. Thank you. Everyone, we're going to rejoin the meeting. Before we get to the IMA workshop, we also would like to open to the public on OA-23-03. We didn't do that last time, so if anyone would like to speak on the ordinance amendment, please come to the podium.
Except for Clark.
Yeah. Hey, I had one good idea.
You had a great idea.
Yeah.
Did you, did the record
I
get
didn't come
that?
here to speak about this, but I'm gonna be very quick. On the barge canal, you have to understand that it's the only place in Citrus County where you can have a commercial marina west of US 19. The Manatee Protection Plan, no new marinas, no new boat ramps west of US 19 except for one spot, the barge canal. So when you have a marina, you have accessory type uses, which are, sales of gasoline and fuel type products. Also, you have a very specific port district unique to the cross-border Birch Canal up there. So I just pass that along for what it's worth. And then I spoke with Eric just briefly about your pods issue. And frankly, it's tied to lot size. If I have a half-acre lot, my neighbor's got a half-acre lot, I don't want that in his backyard. But he's got 20 acres and I got 10 acres. Please, mind your own business. So, just the thought. Thanks.
Thank you, Clark. Anyone else want to speak on the ordinance? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public portion of the meeting. Board, do you have any comments? Clark's not wrong about the lot size. You
And I
missed
think
that.
I think that one of the areas where it was in the golf course community in Inverness. Right outside the golf course community, there's some other communities that don't have deed restrictions where the lots are real small and the storage unit was placed That was when I recall getting a lot of comments from the commissioners.
Joanna, what do you think?
I just walked in. I'm sorry.
Clark said that the pod issue really comes down to lot size. If it's a half acre to a half acre versus 10 acres to 20 acres.
It's something to consider.
It's also number too, right? I mean,
It is a number, and like we have the accessory structures for lots less than 2 acres have to be compatible, consistent with a house. For example, I mean, we can do the 2 acres for pods containers as well. We can. We
I
can
just think
consider
that needs to be workshopped a little bit versus, the trucks. and the
completely
trailers.
outlawed.
Yeah.
What if there are 2 5-acre lots and the guy on the 1 5-acre lot wants to put 10 of these things along the fence line?
He can do so.
It's a
today.
number thing too, right? I could see limiting the number based on lot size and then also,
Yeah, the 2 acres is obvious. Numbers versus lot size is going to be somewhat arbitrary. I don't really have anything that would.
so if they have 5 acres, could they line up 10 sheds down the fence line?
They can do it today. Yeah.
What if
So-
you, what if, what
We
about
call
like
them shed
making it
farms, but we
shielded?
see them.
If you shield it,
Then you have to have inspectors go out and
Does the buffer meet
determine what is a buffer, if it's so big, you gotta have such and such a buffer, or that's a lot.
I don't mind the considering. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, basically right now, one of the ways it's regulated is through the ISR calculations. So, you can have accessory structures, but you still can't exceed your ISR maximum. So that kind of limits you on the size or the number that you can have. And then like Joanna was saying, we have in the land development code, if it's 2 acres or less and you want a accessory structure that's greater than 1,200 square feet, it has to match the primary structure. So, we do have some things in the code like that right now that limit those, but as far as acreage goes or total number, really the only limit to that is your setbacks and your ISR.
So we can put forward that option as maybe just not allowing them for less than 2 acres in size. And then I don't know how to do it with.
Well, it's still, you're only talking to 2 of
I know.
7.
I know. So
Not really. Commissioner Barmes said
3
he
of the
was,
7.
and then, some others might have nuanced positions.
Right. So how do you feel about the less than 2 acres would not allow them at all, but otherwise they could be allowed?
2 seems high.
2 acres seems high.
1.
Okay. So I need some nods or consensus here.
I'm just not really sure. I'm sort of waffling on it
Yeah.
because it's still not
Do you-
very clear.
Do you think you could relook at that and come up with what you think might work better based on what you've heard so far? Because this doesn't have to go to the commission right now, correct? For final approval?
It's set for commission for the end of November, and they're anxious for some of these items.
But is this one that,
I think I can probably say yes, Ms. Lynn. They want to discuss this item soon, right?
Yeah, I think it needs to go to the board.
Okay, well, they'll decide.
I think they should be prohibited, so there.
There you go.
All right.
I'm agreeing with that.
Except in,
And the
You know,
commissioners
10 acres
do
or
watch these.
more.
Some of the commissioners do, so they'll hear all your comments too. I'm not going to convey them, but
So-
I got 2 and 2 and 2, but fine.
Commissioner Stone, when you say prohibited, as far as on any parcel or just small parcels or?
Yeah, small parcels, anything less than 10 acres.
That's still a pretty good sized parcel.
So that's a whole nother
In
number.
10 acres, I don't have to look at.
2, 5, 10. Yeah,
In
or
1
with
acre, I
buffers.
have to look at it. Well,
With or without a buffer.
All right, all right. I got it all. But fortunately, they do read these, so watch these, so that's good. They'll hear all your comments. Thank you.
For the residents of Pine Ridge and other properties that have 1 acre, so I'm favor for the 2 acre.
Now, Pine Ridge has its own deed restrictions, so they may not allow these anyway. So I'm pretty sure Citrus Springs doesn't
You
either.
can't,
So
you can't protect people from a jerk neighbor. If the
We
guy's
try.
gonna put- He's gonna do it.
It's
and
ki-
he
kinda
might
what
even
zoning
graffiti
does,
it
though.
Because he wants to make it a little attractive.
that's kind of what zoning does, though, is make sure that you have a house and you're not next to something that you shouldn't be. It's kind of what it does.
I like the conversation where you were going with the whole accessory dwelling unit on the smaller lots, and it has to match the house and the ISR and things like that. I
The 2
feel
acres,
like
yeah.
I feel like that is going along the right path with it.
Okay, well, that's definitely an alternative that they can talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Should
now
that team-
we will close that and move on to the discussion of the IMA. Y'all want to come forward?
This is a workshop. They're going to give you what they're thinking, and we're not asking, I don't think, for any kind of vote or consensus, just an idea, right?
Yes, correct. My name is Ryan Thompson. I'm with CHW. We're the lead consultant on the County Road 486 IMA interchange management area. Joined with me is my director of planning, Mr. Craig Brazier, as well as Benoit Paniker with Ayers Associates and Chris Donnelly, architects. And today we just want to give you kind of an idea of the concepts that we're looking at implementing in this area. We have draft language in the backup material, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at that, and we can kind of discuss at any point any section of that, but I wanted to kind of keep it at a high level, at least as far as the information that I'm presenting, and look at the concepts. And then there are some decisions that we need to discuss in a little more granular level, and I'll cover those here in a second. Let's see if I can. So,
And Ryan, I'm sorry that they were asking about a map, and it's not in your backup. But do you have a map in one of your slides you can show about
Absolutely.
where you're thinking? Unless I'm jumping the gun for you. and I'm
No,
sorry,
no,
but
no.
yeah.
Thank you, Joanna. It was brought to my attention earlier. So we do have, I think maybe the next slide, or if not the slide after that, we will familiarize you with the area. So again, want to present some of the major concepts for design in the two sub areas, and then seek your direction on some key points. So the first key point we want to talk about is the permitted uses, and what we've proposed as both permitted and prohibited uses in the IMA. We want to look at single-family subdivisions and whether those should be permitted within the IMA. We see this as a high-density, more urban-type area in the future. It has the infrastructure to support that, and single-family detached housing doesn't necessarily correlate with that. So that's a decision point that we need to know from this board, is whether or not you recommend that we allow single-family subdivisions. Building height and buffers, how we treat existing single-family detached that's both within the IMA and then what could also be on the perimeter of the IMA. And development thresholds, we've proposed development thresholds to require certain developments to that require them additional design standards in the IMA. Below these thresholds, you would be able to develop, consistent with whatever your existing land use district permits. But if you exceed 5 units, 5,000 square feet of building, or 5 acres, then you're required to meet additional standards. And then the mix of uses, whether or not we have a mixed use portion of the IMA, so whether or not a development would have to include, say, both residential and commercial, or residential and office. Currently, that's not a requirement within the code, but we want your input on whether or not you feel that that's necessary. And then the last thing that we wanted to discuss is architectural standards. The town center plan overlay has standards for non-residential buildings. And if you're comfortable with those standards the way they are currently in your code, should that be then applied to the IMA? Are there any questions on that before I move? I don't want this to be one-sided. I do want this to be a conversation, and I'm hoping as we go along that occurs. This is the IMA boundary. Kind of the midline there in the map is County Road 486. We do include portions north of 486 up to the southern boundary of Pine Ridge and Black Diamond. the majority of those properties are already in PUD and either under construction or in the permitting process. The YMCA is also in that area. We're including lands from the east, the Duke utility easement. We thought that that was a good boundary. Properties west of that are already kind of established, and there's not really a clear opportunity for redevelopment in that area. And then our east boundary is County Road 491. To the south, we're looking at Horace Allen Street and then jogging over to Sanction. What you see in the gray is the property that Florida Department of Transportation currently owns. That clearly is where the Suncoast Parkway is. Some of that land is in excess, and what they do with that excess land, I think is undetermined, but it could go back either to the county or be sold to the private sector. But we're certain that that is the alignment of the Suncoast. And I do want to mention that a few months ago we did present the IMA boundary with a couple options, as well as these sub areas to the county commission, and that's what their direction is, what we've been moving forward with. So that's what we have presented to you here today.
Can you define the colors?
Yes, sir. So in the yellow is a mixed use area. So that's to encourage master plan communities, much of what you see to the north of 486 today. They could be village or town centers or activity centers. They go by a variety of names, but the idea is that they are high density residential with compatible commercial uses. In the blue, that is comprised of LKQ, predominantly on the east side of Suncoast. And on the west side of Suncoast, we identified kind of a pocket where the Suncoast Parkway and the Duke utility easement down to Sanction kind of create a pocket that could be an opportunity for employment, job creation, light industrial, distribution, research and development centers, those kind of ideas, with supporting uses that could include hotels or medium or high density residential for workforce, for the workforce in that area. So those are kind of the two big concepts that we have. One being kind of a town center mixed use area, and then the other being more job employment focused.
Can we talk about the thresholds that was on your previous slide?
Yes, ma'am.
I found the language that was used in this draft very confusing. You're saying that anything that's there can develop with its underlying future land use unless they aggregate to 5 acres somehow and then they get pushed into the IMA.
Right. They would have to meet, so there's baseline standards in the IMA that everything will have to meet, and there's some exceptions. If you don't trip those thresholds, you don't have to do like certain buffers or whatnot, and that's kind of spelled out in the code. But then if you trip one of those thresholds, you have to meet all the standards that are listed in the IMA.
So there are several residential parcels in the map there.
Yes, ma'am.
And so when they want to expand on their property that they currently have as non-conforming with this, that won't trigger them into this though, because they may not be at this threshold, correct?
Correct. Yes, the idea is that a use that's existing, whether it be a single-family home, a church, or a business, we're trying to avoid creating any non-conforming uses the way we've structured this code. The thresholds are really for new development. And somebody coming in, if they want to do, 5 homes, okay, probably not ideal in this area with how we see it developing in the future. But if they want to do 6 or more, then, they have to meet certain standards. So that's kind of how we've established those thresholds.
And the YMCA right now, do you know how many acres they have?
Well, again, it's an existing use, and they would be able to expand within the mixed use area. I know I'm not answering your question, but I hope I am seeing through to your concern, that they would be able to expand. It's an allowed use within the mixed use IMA. And again, going back to whether or not we require a mix of uses, like a commercial use wants to come in, they have to have so many residential units or vice versa. We don't necessarily want to dictate that, but we want your feedback on whether or not you think that's necessary.
They would be able to expand, but then would they have to do a whole revamp with a town center overlay standards on the whole building?
No. At most, there may be some buffer requirements or something that they may need to do that they probably already address, to be honest.
And Ms. Worthington's comments are also reflected in the backup on colored paper from Gaston Hall. And I know we talked very, very briefly about that the 44 IMA has those thresholds where you have to meet the percentage, or you're changing the building occupancy, for example, you're going from a house to a store. Those kind of things triggered it. And we could do similar language here, because right now the language is it would just be a considered nonconformity. Does that convey it correctly? It's something to consider.
Yeah.
It's been done before. We ironed it out on 44. If you think something similar is correct here.
Yeah, and if it's not clear, our intent is that we're not creating non-conforming uses, so we'll fix the language to make sure that it is clear. So in the comprehensive plan, we've created, we've taken language from we started with the land development code, which got into much more detail and kind of backed into the comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan's required to implement the County Road 46 IMA, and we are, it's kind of an executive summary. So I'll just list here what's included in that, but it's language that's taken directly from the land development code. There is one exception to that, and it was a one-page in your backup, and that was amendments to the existing language in the comprehensive plan for IMAs, and it spoke in general. We would like to avoid the PUD process for applications that are coming through if they're located in the IMA. That does a number of things for development opportunity that I'll discuss here on the next slide. But that is one exception. We wanted to specify that Cardinal and 44 IMAs were treated the way that the current code exists, but add language of how we would prefer the 486 IMA to be treated. I'll go into that here. So we're looking for two different types of review. One that is consistent with the underlying land use district and below the thresholds. Those will be treated as normal. In the permitted uses table, whether it's permitted or conditional or a PUD, that's how that would be reviewed by staff. So whether it's a level 1, 2, 3 review, that would be normal. For those that exceed the underlying land use district uses, like say you have obviously a land use district and you want a use that's not permitted in your land use district, but it is allowed in the IMA permitted use table, that would be allowed, but they would put you in this category, or exceeds the thresholds, then it would be a level 3 essentially review process. So you would, it would require you to go to the county commission for review. But in streamlining the process, you encourage development that's consistent with the IMA standards. the process is predictable for whether or not you're going to be approved. Madam Chair, you mentioned earlier there is a cost with PUDs, and we're trying to avoid that in both time and money to have those produced. And we feel that the language in the Land Development Code for the IMAs is strong enough to give staff the confidence that an application coming through would negate the need for a PUD.
Question, why, I agree, streamlining the process is excellent. Why only on this IMA and not the others?
Well,
You're not the consultant on the others.
I can't speak on behalf of
Oh.
Cardinal and 44. I personally would love to see them go that direction, but we're not the consultants for that, for those two projects. But thank you.
That seems like a problem to me.
Well, we're working with the commissioners, and the commissioners have demonstrated they feel the exact opposite to what just was reflected, so.
I don't think the commissioners will appreciate that. The commissioners want to see more.
Yeah, they're gonna, they've expressed they want to see PUDs. They want streamlined in some ways, but not in approval process. So I understand he's trying to develop an employment center. I'm not sure how well received that will be, but we'll find out because they're going to go to the commissioners later this month. So this is just to give your input, and if you agree with the idea of not having PUDs, okay.
I don't know. I'll have more conversation later, but
It's not that there's not PUDs. What he's saying is there's a certain level
Understood.
where if they're not meeting the threshold, so like if they would go with their existing land use as it is, there wouldn't be a PUD, well, there could be a PUD.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to compare the three IMAs. There's a reason we split them out, is they are so different, each one of them. 486 is the crazy development one right now. So comparing it to 44, which is all existing, and Cardinal, which is vacant, that's why we had them split out like this. So I don't know if consistency, they're so different. I hate to have a lot of stuff that overlaps, frankly.
they're different, but they're the same.
I don't think so. I don't think there's anything the same other
It's
than
all
Parkway.
Citrus County, like, and
It's
you're
all
still
the
gonna
county
be,
and it's all the
it's
Parkway.
inconsecutive, like, I think that all of these IMAs, and I've been saying it since the beginning, they all need to be taken into consideration together. You have this one that offers this one that offers this. It's still in the same county, like, it feels disjointed to me. And I sort of agree with the whole, like, it's just like the variance process that we tried to streamline, and it helped. Like, if we have some guidelines that are already in place that enforce what is already in the land development code and in the comprehensive plan, then why should, and somebody can come to somebody and say, look, I'm following exactly with what you guys said and what you guys wanted in there, then why should they have to go through the whole arduous PUD process? If they're already following what it says and they're under the threshold of what we say the threshold is. Just my 2 cents.
Remember, with the PUD process, there's more opportunity for public input and neighbor involvement. When there's no PUD, it is by right, and nobody knows about it until after the bulldozers are turning the dirt. And so commissioners are hearing from a lot of the public right now that they want more of an opportunity to have input into what growth is happening.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, to that point, I think when we originally came up with this process, we looked at incorporating a required neighborhood workshop for some of these, for the second tier that were required, the level 3. I understand that the county doesn't currently require neighborhood workshops, but if that would relieve some of the concern to mitigate the PUD process. I mean, if that's really the benefit of the PUD, and I can see that, then we would much rather propose requiring a neighborhood workshop and getting out in front of that and being intentional about getting the public's input on certain projects rather than requiring a much more extensive process that may not achieve as quality of a result.
I don't know if with the neighborhood workshop, with the PUD, there's notifications that go out and everything, so that the abutters are notified in the mail and then also public notice. So I don't know how that would work with a workshop.
Right.
Identical.
Yeah, some counties have neighborhood workshop requirements for certain levels of zoning changes. Citrus County's never done it. We don't have a lot of work neighborhoods that actually are appropriate. We don't have a lot of meeting places that are appropriate. It's a lot of staff time and they have processes in place. We've never done that. So this would be pretty out of the box, but also a lot of staff intensive work we'd have to deal with. Not that we can't do it. It's just there's a reason we've never actually done this in Citrus County. Marion County also doesn't, but there are some, I think Pasco maybe, some of the counties to the south require it.
Yeah, I reside in Alachua County, and we're very familiar with neighborhood workshops. The county requires them, City of Gainesville requires them, City of Alachua requires them. So we're very familiar. There's nuances to their process, but they're more or less the same. Some are amending those and not requiring, say, an ad in the newspaper, a printed paper, but more of a direct route to informing neighbors of what's going on, either through their Facebook or their webpage or something of that nature. But at minimum, you would be identifying the properties within a certain distance, whether it's 300, 400, 500 feet of your subject property, sending them a letter, informing them of the opportunity to learn about your project, to hear their concerns, and hopefully mitigate those concerns before it goes to a public hearing. Okay. So looking at the mixed use sub area, the IMA, I kind of already talked about its general intent, but we're looking for master planned communities that are more oriented towards the pedestrian, a mixture of uses, and multimodal transportation. So encouraging biking and walking, and kind of living closer to where you would meet your daily needs with certain uses. So with the design concepts that we've proposed here, we want to include build two lines, so defining that building edge that gives a cohesive kind of sidewalk or pedestrian realm along the building's frontage that's safer for pedestrians, with wide sidewalks, and the building frontage zone itself, I'll get into more detail about, but it's really the pedestrian realm, like where the building facade is to either the street or to the parking, that would include street trees and street furniture and things of that nature. Bicycle pedestrian corridors, those are really sidewalks that would allow both modes of transportation, but we would encourage landscaping and benches and things of that nature as well. And then I wanted to discuss compatibility. I mentioned it before in the previous slide of specific things that we want your feedback on, but if a development comes in and it's allowed a certain building height, if that site happens to be adjacent to a single-family residential dwelling, whether that dwelling is within the IMA or not, should we treat the proposed development differently? Should we impose restrictions on its height, require certain buffers, or certain setbacks from that structure? Some of the benefits of the mixed-use district are, physical activity, because we're, encouraging shaded wide sidewalks within the area, multi-use modal transportation, social interaction, public safety, because you have more people on the streets and interacting with each other, and then the economic benefits of jobs and visitors and the foot traffic to support those businesses. So looking at the build to line, there's a line here that's highlighted along that face, and it really addresses the street well, but then it also provides an opportunity for safe public space along those building frontages. So the build to line functions to limit the distance a building can be set from the street. And then looking at it from a profile view, you have the building, on the left. What I just highlighted would be the building frontage zone, and then you would either have landscaping, say a sidewalk or multi-use path, and then the street. And then we're setting minimums and maximums to account for whether or not a single drive aisle would be in front of the building, and which would then also trigger an associated landscape buffer. With that build to line, you're looking to establish a range. Typically, you're familiar with seeing building setbacks, so that means a building can't be any closer to a property line. The build to line gives an opportunity for setting both minimum and maximums to set a range in which a building can be placed on the street. Okay, and so I just showed you images for how State Road 486 will be treated. Local streets will be treated very similarly. In the code, there's different distance. It distinguishes between the two because the distances may be different. The buffer requirement would be larger on 486, and also accounting for the profile of County Road 486 is wider. So building frontage zone, again, that's that streetscape, that pedestrian realm in front of the building. We feel that this is very important for walkability. It would include a sidewalk with amenities and shade, either through trees or treatment on the building, such as a canopy or something cantilevered to provide shade. It would only be required in the mixed-use IMA. Should clarify, and then it would require a minimum 10 feet of unobstructed path for pedestrians. So if it has street furniture or lamp posts or trees, that can't reduce the path for pedestrians to less than 10 feet. And then it'd be required in a parking lot looking at the entryway, it would be required on both sides of the entryway to that parking lot area. Then bicycle and pedestrian corridors. So as is standard, we want to make sure that the building is connected to the parking areas and that that's connected to the public sidewalks in the street. This is a little more than just a sidewalk. We're recommending that it's a minimum of 8 feet unobstructed. It would also include shade trees to make it desirable for somebody to want to walk, and it breaks up kind of the block pattern and makes it more pedestrian friendly by making sure that it's not too long of a distance for somebody to walk before interacting with another building or feature. Okay. Then looking at compatibility, so we're recommending that the maximum building height in the mixed-use IMA is 6 stories or 88 feet. That in everything here is negotiable. So the distances that I spoke to about the unobstructed pathway, I failed to mention that I want your feedback on that. Do you think that's too much? Here, building height, 6 stories, is that too much? We want to encourage apartment buildings and kind of higher density dwellings, and we see that that's where that would come into play. It may have a ground floor commercial use, with upper story units that may go up 3 or 4 stories. In this case, it would be allowed, 5 upper story floors. So if that is proposed within, 100 feet of, for instance, within 100 feet of a single-family dwelling, should it be treated differently? So the way that the code is structured now is that building would be reduced to 3 stories or 42 feet if it's within 100 feet of a single-family structure. It would also require a 50-foot setback from the property line and require a 15-foot buffer. But again, we want your feedback. Do you think the building height reduction is necessary? Do you think that the buffer is necessary? Do you think the building setback is necessary? What we've seen when communities allow for an increase in building height or a higher density than what's developed around them, that the ones that come in early are essentially punished. They're required to have in a shorter building height. They could use less of their property. Then somebody comes in after them. Well, they can go the full extent of what that code was originally intended for. And what you see over time and overall is a reduction in the density and intensity that was intended for that area. However, we still do want to be respectful to the existing single-family residents that are in the area. So there is kind of that, but then if that single-family dwelling redevelops in the future, it could have a 6-story building when the property next to it could only have a 3-story because of it. So that's why we're looking for feedback on this.
I think that, this goes to Joanna's point earlier that I agree with her that they are different, these IMAs, and in that this one specifically, this is always where this was supposed to happen. This is where the infrastructure was put into place for this development to occur, this type of mixed use, beautiful, coming off the parkway, entrance into Citrus County. It was always talked about that this was going to be the center and where our commercial activity would mostly take place. So I think that that's the way I'm looking at this IMA. 6 stories is high. Real high, especially for this area. So maybe 4 for
Okay.
me. I don't know. I'll have to hear from everybody else.
That's gonna impact fire services, emergency medical services,
It was always planned to be here. Always.
Always what?
This is where it was always planned to take place.
I have a question. Didn't
Can
we
you get
approve-
closer to your mic? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think they're picking you up.
Didn't we already approve the development at the corner of 46 and 491 on the northwest corner? Isn't there a target going in there? as we
Correct. I
speak?
mean, a good half, at least, of the area, not the employment center, but most of his area is already approved and developed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the housing that, as I recall, goes across the north by Black Diamond, goes westbound until almost the YMCA, just about.
Correct.
And
a
that's
big part
already
of his
planned
map is
out.
already developed or approved for
And it's
development.
already been okey-dokey by these guys?
This is something extra?
That's a technical term.
Okay. That's,
How will
It hasn't,
those
or-
PUDs be impacted? I mean,
Madam Chair, if I may, I didn't mention this before, but I appreciate you bringing it up. The PUDs that have been permitted within the IMA are exempt. There are several exemptions that are listed in the kind of preamble of the Land Development Code. So the PUDs, if they're existing and approved prior to the adoption of this new code language, that's their PUD is what they're guided by.
So the answer is, it's already done? And they're
Yes.
exempt?
Yes.
Okay.
The ones that have been approved, yes, sir.
Okay. So the canopied walkways and all the amenities, that's not gonna happen where they're building?
We can't, the way the code is structured, the county would not be able to require them to provide any of the amenities or architectural details that we're requiring within the IMA. Now, if for some reason the PUD lapses and the development is not constructed, they come back with another PUD. At that point, the county would then implement the design standards that were.
How long is your services gonna be here?
I do have a list. We're trying to get it done as fast as we can. I'll go over that schedule if you don't mind me waiting.
Okay.
I only have a few more slides.
May I?
Yes.
They won't be reviewing, the consultants will just be putting the law in place for staff to apply, and then
Got it.
they'll leave.
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
Returning to the building height, I agree with our chairwoman that 6 stories is high. I've lived next door to a 6-story building with a single-family dwelling. You get into all kinds of issues of sunlight and shadow. I think 4 stories is much more appropriate for in proximity to a residential area.
Except that slide right now says if it's within 100 feet of a single family, it's 3-story max, but then 6-story elsewhere. But agreed, 6 stories is a lot for the county, so yeah, I'll need to think about that.
And other things happen with 6 stories. You know, you have enormous parking lots to service a 6-story building.
And the fire guys would love it, but
You know,
they
so
can figure it out, I guess.
She's being sarcastic.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
fire
they-
guys would not love
I don't
it.
think we have a mechanism to get that high yet.
So
Ladder trucks, so.
I have to agree with my fellow commissioners that 6 stories is way too high. I think the idea of 3 stories makes more sense. Probably from the fire apparatus side, they probably can easily handle a 3-story building right now without having to purchase additional equipment, which then obviously puts a whole nother set of issues in front of the county. So I think
Another
that
issue regarding 6, 8 stories, whatever, with all the other development going on, that intersection right now is at its max. And we're gonna be putting in over 1,000 employees in the surrounding businesses every day. And plus all of the 4 and 5 and 700 homes that are going in there and around the whole thing. That's 2 people a household. They all have a car. And right now you've got 2 through lanes in every direction. You've got 2 left-hand turn lanes in every direction, and you've got another deceleration right turn lane in every direction. That's not gonna be able to handle all of those people. And this probably should have been done maybe about 5, 6 years ago. I don't know.
Hang on, when you say that intersection is at max, like, what are you talking about there?
I'm talking about right now.
You're just
you
saying in
barely
your
can get
opinion,
through
when
in
you
one
get there.
traffic cycle, one traffic light cycle. And when you put all of these extra people here, you're gonna be there for 3 traffic lights.
I don't know
491
that
determines
isn't whether or
into
not
4
it's a max
lanes
capacity.
yet.
Or
One
not,
of,
right?
one of their proposals is not to allow single-family residential in the areas that are vacant now. That's one thing that was on a slide that we can talk about, but if we don't allow single-family, there's not gonna be more people. There might be more people seeing the commercial businesses, but they're gonna come anyway.
Well,
Can-
single family means multifamily. If there's no single family, they're gonna be multifamily.
Right.
So that's more people than.
That's more people.
Right.
If that's not one of their proposals, but yes, correct.
And Madam Chair, the idea of the mixed use and why we are leaning this direction and strongly emphasizing the bike and pedestrian component of it, and making it comfortable and to an appropriate scale for the pedestrian is to that point. We want a mix of uses with a high density, high enough to be able to support businesses within that area, and hoping that, a lot of people will utilize those businesses and not have to go out onto the major roadways to be able to meet their daily needs. That they would go down, the block to a restaurant or, a play in a little plaza for kids, for entertainment or, something of that nature. And, the co-benefits of that are bringing the community together and they actually know one another. And, obviously being healthier by walking and biking and doing some of those things. So, and leveraging the multi-use path that's already on County Road 486. So that's our hope, is that these would be little town centers. I know someone on the county commission is familiar with Tioga in Alachua County. That's right down the street from where I live, and it's great. I wish I lived in Tioga, but they do have, 5 or 6 restaurants that you can go to, a gym that's state of the art. They have, different boutique places, and even some of my coworkers live in that neighborhood. There's a variety of housing types, but they love it because, at night they just walk down the block and, there's social interaction, there's things to do, places to eat, and things of that nature. So they're not getting out in their cars and driving down to,
I see that you're encouraging the use of public transit. I haven't been on a bus in 40 years, and I would imagine not many people have. And there aren't that many buses in this intersection that I see. So that's altruistic. We'll go to a yoga class.
It's
and
a
we'll do
long
all that
range.
stuff. I don't think it's going to happen.
Madam Chair, currently, I see that perspective. We want to allow for the opportunity in the future. If there is, a dedicated bus route or something of that nature, a mechanism for staff to be able to, require a transit stop or something of that nature, thinking that, there is an opportunity for that. It may be 10, 20 years down the road, but we want to have that vision for how this develops out into the future. So that's why that's been included.
Madam Chair,
Madam
if I
Chair.
can, just.
1 second. Joe?
We actually require transit stops right now, depending on the number of units or the number of parking spaces required. So the Walmart Plaza in that intersection actually has a transit stop there built in. I don't know if the orange line actually stops there right now, but there is a spot built in. And the
It's one of the stops.
and the shops at Black Diamond, the Target Center actually is required to have a transit stop there as well. So.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
This question might be addressed to both Madam Chair and our planner. What was the original vision for this interchange? Was it to be looked at more in this mixed use category, or was it looked at industrialized also? I noticed that the slide shows to the west of the Suncoast, they're looking for more of the industrial side, and to the east more of the mixed use. Was that the real vision for this area?
I think Ms. Worthington actually said the correct. There wasn't really a vision other than knowing that this is where the Parkway interchange will be, and it's a gateway to the county. So how do we deal with it? What they've done is they've where we expected it to be, which is the area around 486, 491, and all the way out west to the Parkway. But they've also grabbed a portion of the industrial, that's a sanction type area, and made that an employment center. They didn't have to. It's a good point though. I think I like the different tiers. It wasn't really industrial versus commercial or residential. It was more, this is a gateway, we need to deal with it. And
Okay, so if it's a gateway, why do we want to throw heavy industrial and everything else like that? Wouldn't we rather keep this more of a appealing approach of seeing these lifestyle centers versus having more commercial on the west side of the Suncoast?
What I thought I saw proposed was more light industrial and more maybe thinking about technologies and things like that. Am I wrong?
Madam Chair, no, that's exactly right. And we can discuss specific uses that are permitted in that area, but we don't see it being heavy industrial, more kind of business park, tech park, research and development. There may be some distribution, recognizing a potential opportunity to leverage Suncoast Parkway as a route for those business opportunities.
But in that, if you're talking about light manufacturing area, I don't think a commercial recycling center would fall into that. Truck bus heavy equipment garages, blacksmith, spraying supplies and equipment. I think that if that's the intent, then I think the uses have to be modified so that it really gives us that lighter industrial use than what's currently listed here. I read through all this and I came up with like 9 pages of comments. I just don't think that this whole thing was put together very well. I'm sorry, but I think that, as our commissioner earlier said, I don't think it was well written. I think it's got a very scattered
I didn't say that.
approach. I'm sorry.
Are your comments something that you can pass on to the?
I've got them sitting right here that they can more than happily take, and they can either accept them or reject them. But
That's why they're coming before
I
you.
think that's what we're doing is a workshop
Yeah,
today, so they can get our feel for what they have, presented us today, and then do some modifications before we have another draft.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Yeah.
Fennelly?
So the last guy that was the planning director, I believe,
Mr.
Sherman. He was pitching this same Tioga Town Center concept at the Cardinal.
Yes.
And I told him, I said, I think you're crazy. Like, I feel like this area makes more sense for that. That's what I'm saying. I don't want you guys to think that I'm confusing and thinking that all of these interchanges are the same, because they're not. But holistically, it's all should be thought of in the same thought process. Like, what are we offering at one center? What are we offering at another? Cardinal area, that area should just be an interchange with just a few little things, and it's residential, and it should probably always stay residential and agricultural. This area is where the area that Tioga Center, Mr. Sherman had his great idea, but even that Tioga Center, like, you guys are from Gainesville, people in Citrus County don't want Citrus County to turn into Gainesville. That's the thing. I definitely don't want it. I'm just kidding. No.
Yeah.
But
no,
it's got to be scaled back.
I agree.
It's it's like it's
That's fair.
100% 10-foot wide sidewalks, walkability, the town center. I love that idea. I would live in one tomorrow. But it can't be on this grand scale, because that's just you guys coming from Gainesville, and that's just what you understand, and you think that that's what fits there, because the people of this county will reject it. You know what I mean? All of the principles, I think they're right. But your excess, you got to come down a little bit with your maximums. That's my opinion.
Okay.
30 years median age difference between us and Gainesville.
What was that? I'm sorry.
There's 30 years media age difference between here and there.
Where I also understand that he's projecting, though.
No, I
which
agree.
that's what it needs to be. Like, we're not saying that you lay this over and this is going to happen tomorrow, right? It's a process, obviously.
Different demographics.
Correct, and it's always going to be that way, in my opinion. I think, because, I guess until you have things like this, the younger people are going to go to where they are.
I was just saying that, David, because the age now, they're going to reject it.
Correct.
But in 10 years from now, it's going to be more acceptable, and it's already going to be in place, and there's more people more likely.
Well, 10 years from now, if we have the services and the offerings that the younger generation's going to want, if we don't have it, then they're just going to continue to move out, which is what a lot of people in Citrus County would prefer happened anyway.
Right.
Well, I think they've given you good direction on the height. As far as density, I'm not going to. As far as density, they do have a maximum of 20. 20 is our highest one allowed in the county. That's HDR. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to be the devil's advocate on the height of the buildings. And not that I want to see anything more than a single-story building in Citrus County. But one thing they're not making any more of in Citrus County is land. And the more you go up, the less land you need. And I don't know, somebody smarter than me will determine what occupies floors 2 through 6 or 2 through the
It's
top.
like the cemetery cremation argument.
Yeah, I mean,
in New Orleans.
What
is that argument?
In New Orleans.
If we have enough demand to fill 5 buildings, 6 floors tall, and we don't make them 6 floors, they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go farther down, farther back, take up road frontage, take up things and areas in Citrus County that we like the way they are today. My only argument is that you can get more services vertically than you can horizontally. Having said that, I'm not in favor of 6 stories, but.
I don't like 6 stories.
But you're making a compelling
ISR is
argument.
usually our controlling on open space. They're proposing 15% for ISR as a minimum. So That's usually how we deal with that, is to try to not make it intense, which you did earlier on an application with ISR, so.
We already have 4 and 5 stories, right, behind Publix?
No.
That's at least 5 stories, I believe.
No.
What is that? That's at 3 stories.
We have threes. We
Is
have
it three?
threes.
Grant
Yeah.
Living is
3, yeah. So
I mean, the one behind by the elementary school.
Yeah.
It's
3.
three?
I
Okay.
think it's still
Yeah, it's up
three.
on the hill, it looks
It's up on the
tall.
hill.
Yeah, it looks tall, but it's
Yeah.
3
With no
story.
sidewalk.
Don't go
So I
there.
imagine they have elevators.
No, you don't
It's-
need one
it's
for
full
3.
function, isn't
You don't need
3 is the one, you don't need one. Once you get to 4 stories, you need
So
an
there are
elevator.
people that are my age and
Oh,
older
they probably have one.
walking upstairs 3
Oh,
flights?
wow.
She talking about required.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
required.
They're not required.
Exercise.
Yeah, they for sure have.
I mean, you buy that. Yeah, my daughter lives on the 3rd story walk up. Crazy, but she's not me.
I lived in
Alrighty.
walk-ups a long
All right,
time ago.
moving on. I'm
All
trying to
right,
get you some
so
information on
what are we
density.
trying to do?
So, Madam Chair, consensus on building height, 6 maybe too much.
Yes.
Yes.
For the record, Gainesville's 10 stories. We did dial it back, but your point is well
Okay,
taken.
we're not going to compete with them.
Your point is well taken. We're not trying to make this
I think,
Gainesville.
I think 4 max, honestly, in my opinion.
I would
in,
agree.
Thank
in
you.
that area, that gives you have your downstairs, you know, and then you can have some
3 floors.
residential above it and some retail on the bottom story type.
Yeah,
kind of
Perfect.
That's progressive.
Yep.
Do we have a consensus on mixed use? I think you were asking about that also.
Whether or not it would be required. So if somebody wants to come in with a commercial development, are you going to require them to have a certain number of residential units tied to that square footage or vice versa?
Maybe
Currently, the code does not require mandate any mixed use.
I think we could wait until you finish your presentation here, open to the public, and then we'll round out with consensuses.
Yeah.
I think we're putting the cart before the horse here.
Okay.
We're really good at that.
All good discussion. Thank you all. So I only have a couple of slides on the employment center because a lot of the concepts that we discussed in the mixed use IMA would come over here. But obviously the focus not so much on the pedestrian scale, but more on encouraging job growth and how that might be treated. A big emphasis here is on landscaping and architectural design standards, so making it attractive, making it desirable. We understand that our charge from the county commission was, this is a gateway into our community. We want it to look nice and give a great first impression to people coming off the parkway. And then also how might the land development changes benefit from the Suncoast Parkway. So with that being said, we did not include the building frontage zone for buildings within the employment center. And then the bike pedestrian corridors, kind of those wider sidewalks with landscaping, those are not required in the parking areas. But we do have a lot of the other standards that we discussed before. And again, we'll have enhanced landscaping standards where it's visible from 486 and the parkway, and then architectural standards. So with that, essentially, I can conclude with respect to presenting new information. Want to emphasize these points here and what we're looking for feedback on. I would appreciate some direction on the detached single family, how we treat existing detached single family within the IMA or even on the perimeter of the IMA. Our thresholds, whether we require a mix of uses, and then the architectural standards, I think, are pretty well spelled out in the town center plan overlay, but looking for any additional comments there.
Thank you. What was your name again?
Ryan.
Ryan. Okay, so I think we should leave this slide up, and then we'll open to the public, and then
Sure.
after that, you come back up, and the board will give you our bullet points on
Sounds great.
these topics.
Thank you, Madam
That's
Chair.
okay. Thank you. Okay. At this time, we will open to the public, individuals 3 minutes, members of an organization 5 minutes, And if you have any comments, please come to the podium, state your name.
I can't take a breath in 3 minutes.
You can do it. I've seen you do it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to be very quick. I'm here on behalf of LKQ, okay? And notwithstanding the good intentions that were expressed here about
And you are?
Clark Stillwell, P.O. Box 250, Inverness, Florida.
Thank you.
Okay? And notwithstanding the good intentions that were expressed not to make anybody a non-conforming use, I'm sorry, but the way I read this text, it makes LKQ absolutely a non-conforming use. They're greater than 5 acres, and they don't meet the standards. So it's very problematic. Now, LKQ does have a PUD, okay, on 40 acres, but they don't have it on the other 15. And you're talking about employment center, that's our only non-utility publicly traded company in this county. Okay, and Duke is publicly traded, but they're a utility. LKQ is the only publicly traded company on a major stock exchange with a number of employees. So that's really problematic. The problem with the text, if you want a specific recommendation, on page 2, this where it says in the second line that does not meet the standards outlined in this section is a legal non-conforming use. Well, if that language wasn't there, we would be much happier. A non-conforming use is I could tell you a really funny story, but it'll take more than 3 minutes about non-conforming uses. But non-conforming use means you can't even put a new concrete pad in because you're expanding that use. And they need that site plan flexibility. On the PUDs, I appreciate that they are vested. The problem becomes when you're going to modify that PUD and you know they get modified, but you're not doing a major modification. So the project on 486 North that you spoke to that's been approved is a mixed-use project. But what happens if they want to tweak it and put in a little bit more commercial or something else? They're over 5 acres, but even if they tweak it, that 1 acre change, they're now brought into the standards of the IMA. So I have some language for that. I'll send it to you, Chris, to save time. But they should be allowed to expand if their uses are similar to what's already been approved. So that one had a mix of office and commercial. And if they come in with a small change over the administrative level, they should be allowed to do that without being put into these IMA standards for the whole project. So compatibility is a big issue here because what we're running into in the Central Ridge area is we're having high-intensity projects being approved, which was the intent of the plan all along. But when we get into the permitting process, we're being told, hey, your project abuts big lot subdivisions, large lots, and that's not compatible. So the way you cure that here is if you meet these standards, and the architectural standards I thought were great, okay? If you meet these standards, there should be at least a presumption of compatibility, if not per se defined compatible. So my 3 minutes are up. I'll get these comments in writing, and I'll copy you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You good? You don't need a handheld? Okay, look at you. You're moving faster than me. Thank you.
I'll have a letter of authorization for me to speak from the CCBA. Our biggest concern also is compatibility and the non-conforming. If you take the roads around this project, especially on Horace Island, you've got a lot of single-family homes on 5 acres and more that will not comply with this. So you've got those to worry about. You've got businesses there that are not on PUDs that do not conform. So you have a lot of issues with that. And that's our main concern is the nonconformity of all these things that put in. And once they get into nonconformity, it's a nightmare to get anything done. And it's very expensive. And why you want to turn all these businesses that have been there for a long time, whether it's a church, whether it's LKQ, whether it's any of these medical offices, or there's even 2 single-family homes that are on 486. They should not become non-conforming. So that's our biggest thing, is we need to make sure that all these existing places stay as they are, not become non-conforming. You've got a little subdivision that has trailers in it right behind Culver's there that also become non-conforming. So there's a lot of stuff in there. I don't know if you've seen the map for today. I don't know if you ever looked inside the map and saw how many structures are already there on inside that map and what it's going to do to them. Also, I haven't seen a route to get off of that turnpike and get to the southern portion of that IMA. So what's the route to get there? You're going to bring Horace Allen up and come that way, which means you have to go all the way around down to 491 and then back up to it. I haven't seen a bridge or overpass or anything in the design there to go under to get to that southern section. So what's the route to get there? But it'll be, like I said, I didn't have as much time to review this as I normally would because I got it so late and then I got a revision to it. The map's nowhere to be found. And you really need to take a look at what that map is. You should identify all the structures that are in there and if they're going to become conforming or non-conforming after this meeting.
Gaston, do you want to give Clark your 3 minutes?
Sure.
I'm just kidding. I was kidding, Gaston.
Yeah, say that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, twice, seeing none, we will close the public portion of the meeting. Okay, Ryan, do you have a rebuttal on any of the topics that were brought up, PD modifications, compatibility, and non-conforming?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. For the non-conforming, if they're permitted and remain consistent with the underlying land use district, they would not be non-conforming uses. So we'll take a look at that. We'll work with staff to ensure that our intent to avoid creating non-conforming uses through this IMA language is appropriately structured. So, a business that was permitted and, operating under the existing land development code, shouldn't be punished, for, essentially a new code regulation that,
Well, I agree with you, but I think what the point that they are making and how it works now is if you have a non-conforming use and you want to expand or change anything on your property, it would be prohibited because then you would be kicked in. It would trigger this. So what they're saying is there are valid businesses that are above the thresholds that would be triggered into this perhaps if they try to do something. Is that correct, Joanna?
You're right on, and that's what we talked about very briefly about non-conforming and how we treated it on 44.
Yeah.
I think we'd have to look at something similar. I agree, the language right now does push LKQ and others into problems with even slabs. That's true.
Yeah.
But
and we do want to avoid that. So
Right.
we'll come to a solution to address that. As far as access, it's not particularly our charge to figure out how that employment center area would be accessed. We can't dictate where new roads go. Sanction does go, I believe, under the parkway, so there could be a route there. We would like to see additional roads, either new roads or extensions of roads, say Malin, up to connect to 486 with a nice crosswalk to the YMCA and the school property. We would like to see Sanction extended east to 491, but we don't feel that it's in our ability with what the county commission has requested of us to be able to do anything about that. But that being said, there is, so from, I believe there's a realignment by FDOT just to the west that's aligned with the Pine Ridge entrance that would be a new roadway that would go down into that area. But how new roads are created, even in the mixed use area, we're trying to avoid, making requirements of such.
What about PUD modifications? the exempted PUDs that are exempted from this proposal. Now, if they want to have a modification to their PUD, they get pushed into these changes?
Depends. It's not the intent, but if you think of, for example, Pine Ridge trying to modify that front area in 486, I would think if they came in after these develop, we'd want to apply these new standards. Pine Ridge is a huge PUD, so we'll have to be cautious on that and how to write it.
We think what we've proposed is reasonable, and we see new development should be held to the standard. We want
Bless you.
Bless you. We want cohesion in the landscape and how that corridor of 486 is treated. We want consistent architectural standards. We want to have, I know it's a term that's been overused, but kind of that sense of place and how, have that cohesion, and that's done through how buildings look, how signage, is regulated, and landscaping.
I understand, and that's for the future, but what we're talking about would tie the hands of things that have already been permitted. And then if they were to say, want to make a small modification in their site plan or something that they have to come before the board, now they're gonna have to be pushed into this cohesion that they didn't sign up for. So now they're stuck. They have to stick with what they have. I guess that's what you're saying.
We're trying to avoid that, I think, and that's what we did with 44, is to make sure we had higher thresholds, but I think we'll certainly talk about that.
Yeah, and that's for
We
this
don't
board.
want that. That's not the goal, is to say why, like, good job, do you can in a basketball court. That's not what we're intending, so we'll have to tweak this.
There is a lot of gray area there, of course, there's circumstances. But ideally, the area would be cohesive. Again, we don't want to, punish somebody that's currently operating under their existing regulations.
I have a question.
Mr. Bramlett.
The red outline area, is that still up for debate? Like, are we considering and workshopping that particular area, or has that already been defined?
Madam Chair, I would say everything we've discussed and presented is up for
Okay,
debate.
so that particular, we don't have like an actual defined area for this IMA area yet, like
No,
we have for
or
the
the
others.
concept of the 2 tiers, the employment center and stuff where have been
Right.
workshopped, but they're gonna have to bring that before you as a comp plan amendment to adopt the IMA. It has
Yeah.
proposed in really small letters there at the top, proposed IMA boundary. It's not adopted at
Right.
this time.
I think that southern portion down on the, what would be the west side of that, I think that area should not be in this IMA. I think that makes it too large. We're discussing accessing that particular area. Those areas are all farm and rural, very agricultural. I almost feel like it should go like across the Horace Allen, straight across. That gray area should be the southern boundary where the state already owns, and then there's just that little triangular portion that's left in there with that little yellow line. Those little areas, I don't know even if we exclude those areas too, because I know that area out there very well. That's just a very rural area. Access is limited, like Mr. Hall's talking about. I think that should be revisited. And then also, like, I wanted to sort of just make a point about some of the things. I feel like it's kind of like getting a little adversarial, but I know that this is like an exchange, right? Like, and I 100% trust Joanna and the staff to work with these gentlemen to where we have these, we have these little nuances of things like we're talking about, the non-conforming and the PUD modifications, to trust and know that we'll work through those, because they're just going to go by what we say. They're just making, recommendations. And if we say, no, we don't like it, it doesn't work. Okay, so change it. Make it what it does work, right? So I think that we leave a lot of that to Joanna and her staff, because I trust in them with my whole heart. And then a big thing is I don't like the size of that IMA for that particular area right there.
Okay.
What's the justification? Like, is that just because Sanction Road and you just thought that was like a good cutoff, or?
Well, certainly Sanction Road provides a good cutoff, but the Suncoast and the easement from Duke kind of create a barrier, right? And some of the uses are, we want it to be light industrial research development and job creation and those kind of uses that may not be compatible with the single family detached subdivisions that are around that area. So we saw that as a unique opportunity, and especially being close to Suncoast Parkway, where it could leverage a lot of job opportunities for the county in that area, where you have commuters that are either using Suncoast, they get off, they're right there, they're at their job. You know, hopefully it'll include some multifamily, or someone living in the mixed use IMA would work over in the job center. But that's kind of the idea. We saw it as an opportunity, a pocket that could support employment center type uses and could also leverage the Suncoast Parkway interchange.
Yeah.
Granted, its existing development pattern is not consistent with that, but
I think what happened though with the other interchange areas is that's what they intended some of those for. Like the industrial, I feel like there was a lot of the industrial element discussed with the Cardinal interchange. There's a lot of that. We talked about a lot of that already. So that's, I keep going back to this same point. Like we have these three areas that we're developing. We can just say, okay, we're going to try and focus all of this kind of development with a little bit of, supporting infrastructure on this IMA. And in my opinion, that should probably be like the 44 area, in that area right there, center of the county. A little bit of it around here. This should be more like a lot of like the higher density residential with a lot of the shopping, because this is what's already happening in this particular area. And then as far as like that particular area down on that southern area that you're talking about for industrial, that doesn't fit in that area, in my opinion. And even in 20 years, it just doesn't fit. This is an agricultural area already. I think if we just exclude it, then we limit the opportunity for that. I don't know. I mean, we're just spitballing and.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
I don't know. For me, I would like a copy of the map, and because that was part of it, I want to look into it further before I have like real strong thoughts on what the boundaries should be. I mean, I do know the area, but I really want to take a look at it better. So we didn't have the map, so
right.
That was something.
I have a question regarding the map. When I first looked at it, so here, the first time I saw it, I was wondering why 491 and 486 intersection is at the edge of the IMA instead of the center or near the center. It seems that just east of it should be considered if it's part of the.
We're talking about the parkway, though.
Yeah, this is related to the park. This is related to the parkway, yeah.
It's an interchange.
Yeah, so will development continue? It does. We have Wawa and Wendy's, but had to put a cutoff, and it seemed like a development cutoff because you really do start getting some residential past that.
Okay.
With the size of the IMA though, why do we even have to include what's been approved up on that?
That was my
northwest
next
corner?
question.
We've got the new Target going in there. Why does that even fall in here? And, got the YMCA. That all is already approved and developed. Why should it be part of this?
Right, and I think the argument is it's very intense, and there's no guarantee that things will be built that way or stay that way. This is an area that absolutely will be a target for the IMA, and Target's approved, yes, and they're under construction. The area to the north is approved, but it's not under construction. We have no permits, so I don't know if that'll ever happen. I think that was the thought. It is still a PUD, and so if they came in like that, sure, but
Then it would have to conform. Like they would have to come here with major changes, and then this board would have to say okay, and then the commissioners would have to say okay.
yes, and how it's related to this, because I think that area definitely you can say is going to be impacted by the Parkway exiting there. That commercial is where they're going to go, And right now, you've already seen the last thing between 491 and Y. It's next Tuesday for the commissioners. You guys have seen it. That whole northern area is under control as far as approval. Will they develop them all? I don't know. They're not all under permitting. But it was intended that that's where we think development will go. But we've heard some discussions even with the commissioners about that southern pocket. I know you used the word pocket on your slide too, as to whether that's appropriate or not. So it sounds like that's still under discussion.
The area that I'm just talking
Yes,
about right
the
there.
little pocket. He calls it the pocket on his slide, and I've heard that term before. Is whether that should be part of it.
Are we done with this slide, and can we go back to the slide where he wants consensus on some things?
Thank you. Focusing on so we can get out of here today.
Yeah.
Thank you. Need somebody to keep going. There you
Okay,
go. Nope,
okay.
you were there. You were there. There you go.
Okay. The proposed uses. I think Commissioner Bass brought up some things on the proposed uses for inside this IMA. I agree with him in some center, like, I don't think commercial recycling center belongs, but I see it's conditional use in,
Right.
in some, and it's left off of the other.
Mixed use.
There's the two sections, so.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any things that jump out at them?
Shooting range,
Yeah, it's with a PUD, but
yeah.
still, I don't think a shooting range would belong in this area, either way.
Oh,
But,
what about an indoor?
well, I guess, I don't know.
But it's very limited to the Parkway commercial and the Gateway. What do you want to see here? So, what would be sufficient when they come off?
Welcome to Citrus County.
Very good.
Because this discussion, the gateway to Citrus County that was what was pitched at the Cardinal. This is the gateway to Citrus County, Tioga Town Center.
No,
They're
it
not here
wasn't.
anymore.
I know, but that plan is.
So I think you're saying that as far as the proposed uses, maybe dial it back a bit. This is clearly not just GNC. They've grabbed some industrial, it looks like, on this. So maybe dial some of that back.
Yeah, and I agree with Commissioner, keep on calling me, I'll just call you Dave, Commissioner Bramlett, that, you know, I think that Joanna will make very good decisions working with them too, and I trust them to do most of this planning. And one of my questions for you was, is there anything in here that you guys see that you couldn't enforce or that doesn't look good to you?
Absolutely. I mean, this is all, we're all, as he put, spitballing now. So yeah, staff has some discussions on a few things and we'll work with the consultant on that. I agree. There's a few things here that are like, yeah.
Okay.
You're not being asked, fortunately, to adopt. It's really
Right.
just
No,
exactly
it's
like
just
you
a
said. And this is the LDC, which is kind of a little bit ahead, but the comp plan is going to be a lot more general. So
Anyone else have any of the proposed uses?
Yeah, so the residential, single family and detached and all that stuff, we sort of talked about that with the
She's
mixed
on
use.
one. She's on one. You haven't gotten to two yet.
I think we finished one just now.
Are we done with one?
Well, I'm just going through because we already talked about building height,
Okay.
right? We already said four stories.
He's
we
trying to get out of here too.
thought of,
I would-
thought so.
Madam Chair, if we may, out of respect, I would like to circle back to number 2 and whether or not detached single-family residential would be an allowed use within the IMA. Now, if it's under the thresholds and allowed in a land use district now, then okay, that's a separate matter. But whether we want to encourage that type of use within the IMA.
My opinion is no, but.
I think
My
that
answer is no.
it should be no with a distance. I always, when we were dealing with all these IMAs, I remember when Jeanette Collins was here and the whole 491 corridor and how all of that was like tiered and progressive, like development and the way that was a very good plan and a very good idea. And it was trying to keep high intensity commercial away from kind of the way the code does now, but it just was like tiered and progressive, like, I don't know if progressive is the right word to use, but
Transitioning
it was,
from a
yeah, exactly.
more
It-
intense to a
It
less
encouraged
intense.
it, but it only encouraged it in this particular area. Like you, obviously right where the Target and all that is, that area should be your Tioga Town Center. That's all the Target obviously is not gonna be at the same level of specifications, but that whole eastern quadrant of the IMA right there. And then down around that left side, if you guys decide that you wanna keep that little pocket area in there, then that area should all continue to be residential and be developed to the new plan and to the new code.
The part that's
The
farms
employment
now?
center?
Yeah.
I
If-
think that's the employment center. so
Employment
that's
center.
Right.
industrial.
Yeah,
But
It's not industrial
Madam
zone.
Chair, I believe what Mr. Bramblett's recommending is that it's not employment center, that it's
Correct.
an extension of the mixed use.
yep. If you were gonna leave it in there, right? Cause then if not, you just take it out and somebody could develop it as they saw fit in the future anyway. But if we're trying to include and make that whole little area, which that little corner right there seems a little weird to me, just because of like what Mr. Hall's saying, it's hard to get to, and I doubt they're gonna build roads and just build some roads so they can access this particular area. Maybe a developer would if they wanted to develop that area, but they could already develop it now.
So then what you're saying is permit within the mixed use area, no, permit within the employment center area, yes?
Geographically.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the word that I'm looking for. Geographically speaking on that IMA area.
Madam Chair, if I may, I would like to make one point that that pocket would be visible from the parkway. So I think there is merit in including it. Now, what goes there is up for discussion.
I think we should leave it out because it's semi-rural now and let it develop as it may or may not.
I understand, but I think I may or may not be correct, but I think the consensus of Board of County Commissioners is that they want to present something very, I never heard the gateway for Cardinal. I heard the gateway, this is the gateway, and that there seems to be a consensus that they want beautiful, something welcoming for people when they come off that parkway.
That
So-
can be accomplished by number 6.
That's the center of Citrus County though, like the whole gateway into the county.
The town center concept is a contemporary concept that it's high on the agenda for planners and consultants. I've seen it. I've seen very successful town centers in places like Alachua, Gainesville, Orlando, and I'm sure in Pinellas County, they're all over. We ain't there yet. As a developer comes in to build multifamily units to go along with retail, restaurants, and all the other things that, the piece parts that make this town center work, there's nobody to occupy those spaces, there's nobody to patronize those restaurants, nobody to buy those goods from those retail stores. I think it's a good concept. I think there's a big component that is lacking here in that we don't have the population base now that other communities, other successful town centers have the luxury of. We just don't have that. I like the concept, but I think we will inadvertently be encouraging more variances, more delays in development, because to get a town center going, somebody's got to have a lot of money, a lot of willpower, and do a very good job of selling it to businesses, residents, to make it happen. Good concept. I'm not sure how we get from where we are to that town center that we see on all the slides every time we sit through a presentation. And it's no disrespect to CHW or anybody else. I know it's a popular concept. I'd like to see it happen, but we got a long way to go from here to there.
I think we're trying to plan for the future and put things in place so that when development does happen, we have a plan in place, and that's what we're workshopping, is trying
But in the meantime,
this is not about today.
I get it.
We're planners, we
But
know.
it could mean that there's a lot of vacant land up there for a long time until somebody with deep pockets comes and says, time is right to build a town center in Citrus County.
And just a word of caution
fine.
for number 6, it is referencing the town center plan overlay. Y'all have never seen that. That's a section of our code that's beautiful but never used.
How
It's
dare
not
you? We've seen it.
No, you
I've
have
read
never
the code,
seen it. In the town center plan overlay section, nobody's net developed to that.
but I've read the code.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm sorry. I mean, never seen it as an application
Makes two
before
of us.
you. It's beautiful, but not very difficult to implement with a ton of money involved. And so instead, we use our non-residential architectural standards. I think they're pretty good. I think they're working fairly well when we can get people to comply with them, and we're making it happen. Just so you know, that town center plan overlay, those are some very, very stringent criteria in our code that y'all have never seen an application use. So it's really a big deal.
I think that some of this was started out of some commissioners' frustrations with some developments that have already been approved. And they felt like they wished they had more criteria or more standards they could have applied, but felt their hands were tied. So while I hear what you're saying, like we're not there yet, the few things that we have seen, the commissioners wished they would have had. Some commissioners wish they would have had stronger standards to apply. So that's kind of what they're asking for. Give me some standards so that in the event any do come forward, I can have something to hold their hand, hold them to. So it's like, how do you get to the future if you don't plan now for what's going to happen in the future? Now, exempting the ones that are already there, that kind of, that whole corner, like you've said, is already approved. So the only chance of that conforming to the new standards is if whatever's planned there doesn't work, which, we do have PUDs that don't ever come to fruition. So if they don't come to fruition, then they're going to have to comply with the new standards. I'll stop talking.
And Madam Chair, speaking to the PUDs that are under construction and been permitted, they are to a higher standard than what we typically see in other areas. What we've proposed is much in accord with those developments. More landscaping, the architectural standards, I think, will be comparable. So I have a lot of respect for the plans that have already been approved and brought before you. So I don't know that there'll be a stark contrast with what we're proposing in those developments in particular.
Do you have the consensus you needed for 1, 2, and 3?
Yes, I believe we've talked about those
Okay.
sufficiently.
Number 4, buffers.
So where we have buffers where there is parking between the building and a street. Only a single drive aisle is permitted, whether it's a local street or County Road 486. So we do require a 25-foot buffer along 486 if parking is located there. And if it's a local street, I believe it's 15 feet. We're using that same buffer if a development is adjacent to a single-family residential building. Again, going back to that slide where you saw the height of the building come down, the addition of the increase in the building setback and the buffer, that was kind of a three-prong approach to ensuring compatibility. So that in particular is what we're looking for your direction on, if a buffer is necessary when adjacent to a single-family dwelling.
I say yes.
I say yes too.
Yes.
We have pretty stringent buffer guidelines already. I feel like, I don't know if stringent is the right word. I think that they work. When I see buffers, the buffers that we institute or that we enforce and the Land Development Code enforces, and then I see them in real life, I think that they work. So I would agree with Ms. Worthington.
Okay.
Anybody else?
What about the parkway? Is there a buffer between the parkway and the thing that, what did you call it?
Okay.
The pocket?
Oh,
If
the
that's
state
gonna be
has their
residential, because that's been a bone of contention for 20 years with the parkway.
FDOT does what FDOT does.
Huh?
I was about to say, the state has their own buffer.
Yeah, we can't enforce it for them, but they do have a pedestrian trail, the bike trail kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not aware of any buffers they're putting in. They might do walls or something, someplace like they've done to the south, but, the parkway's gonna do what they do. They're
Yeah.
not subject to our standards.
And the bike path will be on the west side continued.
Is it on the west side here?
It is.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes.
I lost, I looked at that.
Madam Chair, to answer Boardman Roy's question, we have not specified anything to address the Suncoast as far as a landscape buffer. We're open to that. I think, building facades that are visible from the parkway, yes. Landscaping, as far as, parking lots and where vehicle, areas would be visible from the parkway, yes. But we haven't actually specified a buffer along the parkway. I'm not sure if that's where you were.
I was just curious if there was gonna be any consideration for that. Right now, you drive down the last thing that just opened, and you see continual or repeated cul-de-sacs where there once was a street going through.
Right.
And the last guy that's by the cul-de-sac, that's his private parking lot and his basketball hoop and stuff like that.
Right.
And I hear there are larger tracts of land, aren't there? It's all rural and farming.
Not all, but some.
That's another thing. Are you going to require a certain size for development? You don't want a guy coming in there and saying, I want 2 acres, I want to build me a store, you know?
Well, that's why we like the thresholds. The store, if it's under 5,000 square feet, it would be held to the development standards that are in place now. So it'd be a smaller store.
Are you, since we're talking about development along the Sun Coast, but not on the Sun Coast, are you having here any prohibitions against billboards?
Yes.
It's in there.
Yes.
The county already does.
Okay, I would hope so.
It's not a prohibition. It lists a number of the streets that can have billboards, and the parkway was left off intentionally.
Okay.
So
Those
no
can get
billboards.
Pretty offensive, particularly if they're lit.
All right,
Oh,
so number 4, we're good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Number 5, the thresholds. I think that you and Joanna are going to work on some of this to figure out the non-conforming things and items that have been brought forward.
Certainly to iron out the nonconformities and then how these thresholds may be implemented. Yes.
Anybody else? Thresholds?
I feel like this area needs more public input. So like does this workshop go to the BOCC? Like, are they gonna have
It
a
does.
workshop? And then there'll be public input opportunity there too?
Correct. They're going to go to the second meeting in this month
Yeah.
for the commission.
I think that whole thing right there just needs more people to talk about it. Need the Gaston Halls and, the Stillwells and people that have lots and lots of history and experience and have more time to review and understand it better.
And we will speak with them as well.
Very good. All right, so the last thing you wanted to know.
Well, I apologize,
Sorry, go
Madam
ahead.
Chair. No, there's 2. So whether we mandate a mix of uses, which we really wouldn't want to do, but want your opinion on. Whether a commercial development comes in, would you require a certain number of units to go along with that? Or if, an apartment complex comes in, would you mandate that a certain amount of commercial is associated with that?
I don't think so, but maybe certain geographical areas where I can see like your town center, like I was saying, where if you had some retail with some residential above and stuff like that, once you're creating this area, as long as what you're proposing would allow that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like the idea of making somebody that says that they want to do some residential and then you're going to make them do some commercial, or if somebody wants to do some commercial, you're going to make them do some residential. It should be allowable.
Yes.
It should be up to them.
I think the challenge is with some of the things you're suggesting is that they're going to write this law for whatever the map is that's drawn, and they can't really say, well, like it's mandatory over here and not
Why not?
mandatory.
Why not? He's implying 2 zones right now.
Well, yeah, I guess
You
that's
could say
true.
whatever you wanted to do.
2
This is
different-
this is this. I think that's good planning.
Yeah, I don't know. How's it make you feel?
I'm not a fan of the requirement. I agree. If you want to put in a small convenience store, you should have to put residential. Now, granted, he's got an exemption up there for 5 acres and 5,000 square feet, so that's not bad size. Cardinal making more sense. I mean, you want people to be able to live there, but they're usually different developers, residential and commercial, and that's where we have a problem with it. I think the more intense developments like the town center plan, agreed. So maybe we can do some thresholds where they hit a certain intensity. By the way, you're in this, and so intense, you gotta deal with residential too,
Yeah,
or vice versa.
That makes a lot of sense.
is there something, a mechanism or something to restrict the dollar store spread, I mean,
No, we
Citrus
cannot-
County
we
has
cannot
more
pick and
dollar-
choose.
It has more than dollar stores as orange barrels. And orange barrels
We
have been around
cannot,
for
retail is
15 years.
retail, yeah.
We're
Fine.
gonna, we're
What if
gonna
some guy
change it
says, I
to,
wanna put a dollar store in there?
We could reduce the square footage.
Following along with Commissioner Royce, one of the other commercial activities is car wash facilities and gasoline sales and service. We constantly hear about, we've got too many car washes and too many gasoline stations. Can that be restricted?
Absolutely. You can take those uses out if you don't think they're appropriate. I think by the parkway, a gas station is very appropriate because that's why you get off a lot of times. But a car wash, you shouldn't get off to wash your car, so.
Right there already.
So, I mean, there are several that I think that we need to look at that need to possibly be removed. They just make no sense, to me anyways.
Yes,
Like a
and-
racetrack
for
and an
my
outdoor
2
arena.
cents, I'm not in favor of compelling the mixed use, not
The requirement,
the requirement.
right, unless there are some thresholds like she just suggested.
I
Okay,
appreciate that.
now we can move to 6?
Yeah, if we're not going back to 1, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay, so you're asking if we want the town center overlay for this IMA, right?
The architectural standards within the town center plan overlay. So it would just be referencing that section for how non-residential buildings are regulated.
Well, I like
I would
it.
rely on staff on that particularly.
They're already there.
Yeah, I like it.
Why rewrite it?
Yeah.
Just let it run. If it's there, it's there. And if Joanna feels comfortable with it,
I've never seen a project use it, so I don't know if I'm comfortable or not.
Well, we've never seen a project like any of these that we've been proposing on any
Exactly.
of these.
I think the more intensive ones, this is exactly where to go.
so leave it in.
Well, I don't want to apply it to everything, you know? All right, maybe we can think.
You don't want it to all non-residential?
I do want to, but that's not what they're asking. The town center plan overlay is entirely different concept than our usual non-res. It's much more intense. There's a lot of factors. It's pretty thick.
I don't know. enough
Do you
about it.
think it would
Only-
maybe not apply to both zones? Like, or, like when they're talking about the employment center zone and then the mixed use zone, maybe it only would apply to the mixed use zone versus the.
Absolutely, it wouldn't belong in the employment center area. I agree if they have that concept. I'm just, the town center plan overlay is so intensive with its standards. I've never even applied it anywhere.
But
It's-
only the architectural standards, not the whole, all of.
That's what it is. It's an architectural standard
Oh, that's it.
document, yeah.
Houses all have a certain theme, or the buildings, they all have a certain theme.
There's some vague language about that too. The non-residential commercial standards absolutely 100% need to apply, no exemptions, period. Applying the town center plan overlay, I'm not trying to exclude you,
gonna-
what do you think?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that's one of the few sections I don't have memorized.
Yeah, because we never see it.
You don't have it memorized, but I think it's just
excessive.
trying to apply a more aesthetically pleasing cohesion, like he talked about earlier, to these developments.
And it could be something that we do, as Mr. Bramlett stated, if we wanted to have some sort of threshold for requiring a mixed-use component, residential, commercial, maybe you could have a threshold that kicked in the town center plan specifics, so if you got over a certain amount of square footage, or if you got over a certain number of units, okay, you gotta kick into this higher standard and do that.
I like that.
If you're under that threshold, then you're just gonna go off of small non-res or large non-res or whatever that threshold would
Seems
be.
a little, it seems like it should be geographically based though, because then you're gonna have you got something that's a town, I don't know, I guess if it's that large and it has its own architectural standards, it's gonna stand on its own anyway, but then you have this little something next door that doesn't conform, and then it's like patchwork, which is what they're trying to do away with.
But then if you get the little things that come in first and then somebody comes in with the town center, then
Right.
do you make the town center conform to the small one or?
Unless you just blanket the whole thing and then you just have to conform.
I think it'd be helpful if we took a closer look at the town center plan overlay stuff. Like I said, neither one of us have that one memorized. And see if there's some stuff in there we can grab. I think there's some that are probably a little too much, but we can probably work with that.
Is this like the town of Davie down in South Florida where it's got the western theme going on?
They're very similar as far as that strict, yes. You have to have the similar architectural things, et cetera. And
I will say that I kind of like that though.
How would they even apply it to McDonald's? I mean, you got a brown
yeah,
McDonald's.
exactly. And it's
That's
a great,
nothing.
it's a
And
great
you know
thing.
what? You drive around there and it's very aesthetically pleasing.
It's a great thing, absolutely.
you
but
know
do
where
we
you
want
are.
it everywhere?
Correct.
And in the villages, there's examples of that. They're little town centers and how they're themed. They're all unique, but you know where you are.
Right.
You know.
It's great, and that's coming for somebody comes in for an office, and what are you talking about? But,
Or a Dollar General.
or a
has to
Dollar
co-
General.
I
Not
mean,
that we're
do you want the
Family
Dollar
Dollar,
General
Dollar General.
Yeah.
Or you just
to
want it to
look
look
like
better.
do you
Yeah.
want it to look like everything else?
Yeah.
Or maybe everything will look like Dollar General.
No, I don't
We're
think.
not allowing that one.
Then that's how you keep those out of this particular area. You don't zone them out. You just restrict them out. And if they say no, then we're not going to do that, right?
Right.
Because I mean, I've even seen like the Walmarts. Like you go down there, and it's literal. Like they have like that 40-foot wide path where it's all the trees. All you do is you see the little sign. You can barely see the buildings, and it feels good to drive around something like that.
So I think the confirmation is they do like the architectural standards.
Okay.
Yeah.
In this particular area, I think it
Understand.
fits.
Understand, yes.
Down in Cardinal Lane, that area down there, no, it doesn't. That doesn't make a whole lot of
Be a
sense to
special
me down
developer
there.
putting it in there, yeah.
All right. Well,
I look forward to those good-looking Dollar Generals.
any other comments,
Any other
board?
Dollar General store?
Adjourn.
No. You're
just
not
have
done with
one-
me yet, but I
one
think we're
question.
done with you guys. You got everything you need?
Well, I failed to cover this slide. So this is our estimated timeline. So thank you all for your input. I think this was a very healthy conversation. We'll continue to refine this. At the end of the month, we'll go to the Board of County Commissioners, revise our materials accordingly, hold a workshop with the public to get their feedback, get final edits, and then we'll hold the public hearing process for approval.
Your slide has got the wrong date on the very end.
Going back
Sure
to April
does.
2023, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
That time shift.
I should have skipped that slide.
Then January did
There
too.
you go.
You have January too. Yeah, you're fine.
I
Say
only have
hi
one
to Randy
question that-
for us.
I only have one question. Eric, you haven't put any input in, and I would like to hear, not to put you on the spot, but I would like to hear your input on this entire matter.
Well,
You're on.
You're on. You're
Okay.
good.
The concept is good. I think as a newcomer to Citrus County, I think we talked about this at the commission level. I think historically it's just kind of been the chair used the word hodgepodge. It's just kind of things pop up randomly, whether they make sense or they're compatible or not. So I think the intent of this the Parkway being there is to end the hodgepodge and have some uniform development and to have it look like a specific place so you know where you are. I think the feel you get when you're in the village is unique and different and it has a home feeling to it. There's a lot of places in the country, like if you look at Hilton Head Island, where their architectural standards are really strict and McDonald's doesn't look like McDonald's and Walmart doesn't look like. Those companies will build to whatever your requirements are. When you get, I was on a flight once in Hong Kong, and the first thing I saw was a Starbucks, but you would never know it was a Starbucks because it was required to be built. So they'll build whatever way you want it to build, and they'll make it look however you want it to make it look. So defining yourself as Citrus County, as the Nature Coast, as a unique place, the Fortune 500 companies will be happy to comply. So these are all good ideas. The one thing that I thought of when requiring residential with commercial or commercial with residential, I think you want the market to dictate what goes where. I'm thinking if a Marriott hotel wants to come here, I think we would be happy to have them. but I don't know the Marriott Hotel is in the business of residential. So I think that's one thing I think is the right choice is you don't want to block one development for another. And if you're a McDonald's, I don't know, or a Chick-fil-A, that's what everybody wants. If you're a Chick-fil-A, I don't know that you should be required to bring residential factor into it because they just that's not their world. That's not. But you can have really strict architectural standards for a Chick-fil-A, and they will happily comply with that because they're in the business of selling chicken. You tell them what you want it to look like. So anyway, those are just off the top of my head thoughts.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Madam
Is there any other board discussion or comments?
Yes.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Say hi to Randy for us.
Oh, I will. Absolutely.
Your next meeting in October, you have 2 conditional uses for churches. And then the last application that was scheduled for November has asked for a continuance, so you have no November meetings. We have a whole month off, and you guys earned it today. I did not think it would be this long, but I appreciate all really good input. You guys gave wonderful comments, so thank you. You're going to see Joe jumping in more and more because we're pushing him into the fray. I neglected letting you talk beforehand, and I should have. So did you have anything you want to talk to him about?
We should mention why Joe's going to take a larger role.
I was just kind of
That's why
glossing over that.
That's why she was punting
I was
to
glossing
you.
over that. I'm not retiring or anything. I'm still around. I've been reclassified as a deputy growth management director. So now I'm right under Eric, which is great.
Let's call it a
So
promotion.
it is a promotion as well. Yes.
Well deserved.
But Joe should be jumping in, as you heard. He knows what he's doing, so I have entire confidence in him as well. So you get a month off. The bad news is that the Tuscany development, the large thing in Beverly Hills, was continued to December 21st. So that is Christmas time, but not Christmas yet. So the Thursday before Christmas, make sure you got to work one day or one morning. And I just heard them say they might want to appear then in December too. That would be that meeting. So if you can not schedule the 21st for vacations, please do. That's it.
Thank you, Joanna. I have a question for you. Based on Eric's comments and all the things that he commented on, is there any plan to look at Cardinal again? Because we did all the things you said you don't think are good ideas.
This board actually instructed to fix Cardinal, and so although we have a consultant there waiting on me to rewrite Cardinal and bring it back, that the CPA is a mess. The comp plan for Cardinal is bad. The language is bad. It's not something I can implement. There's terms in there I have no idea what was supposed to be. So it's in my hands to rewrite. I need to bring it to you. I hoped I'd have it for you by next month. I'm not going to, but I'm trying. It's just we've been kind of busy.
Did
But
that
soon.
happen during the time when you weren't here?
It did.
I thought so.
I had no input.
But I don't, and neither did Joe.
I was
okay?
against it.
We're not going to blame existing staff or past staff. I'm not going to blame anybody, but I have to rewrite it. So Cardinal is on hold. The consultant's waiting for me to fix the comp plan so they can bring the land development code back to you.
Thank you.
One-
Anything else? Richard
one-
has?
Do we have to look at the item L, additional items for approve the PDC meetings
We
for?
do, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
see Ms.
24.
Carissa raising your hand over there. Please do that, yes. You need a motion on that to adopt those.
Okay, board.
I'll make a motion to
Okay.
approve
Second.
the,
We have a motion by Commissioner Bass, a second by Commissioner Faismer. We are adopting the meeting dates for the next following year.
Okay.
And you'll notice that July is one meeting just because of the way July 4th was.
All in
we'll deal with it.
favor? Say aye. Opposed, nay. Carries 7-0. And Eric.
One more comment is the new budget for the county began on Monday, or actually the first, which would, I think was Sunday, but
We're
part of
getting
the,
paid now?
well, part of that budget was, you're getting paid in gadgets. So part of that budget was they approved tablets for the board members. So we're going to work with IT on how best to implement that so that you can hold a tablet and not a 3-ring binder when you come to these meetings. So as far as how you're going to receive that information, what it'll look like, we'll partner with IT, but I would suspect within the next couple months you should have tablets.
Very good.
Hopefully, yes. The supply chain sometimes
Yeah.
throws us down, but yes, that's coming for you. And
Okay.
the 3 of you that are not getting renewed or not getting renewed, that are up for renewal in January, please make sure you apply or reapply if you want to continue on the board. Sorry, I need to stop talking.
All right. It's 12:30 and the meeting is adjourned.